hand-on quick take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe for this Thursday, January the 16th in London. Coming up this hour.
Phase 1 done. The US and China sign on the dotted line. Key provisions on IP theft and efforts to close the trade gap are seen as positives, but it's a mixed picture for stocks amid concern over what comes next.
Goldman Sachs and Bank of America shares drop after earnings disappoint in the fourth quarter. Morgan Stanley wraps up the big bank results today.
Russian President Putin names a new prime minister in an overhaul that could extend his 20-year rule, and President Trump's impeachment trial will begin on Tuesday after the House delivers the charges to the Senate. I'm Leanne Gerrans with World News.
And TSMC's 5G ambitions. Apple's main chipmaker beats estimates on hopes the 5G rollout will galvanise growth. Watch European chip stocks at the open.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, on DAB Digital Radio London, Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington DC, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
A very good morning from London. I'm Roger Hearing.
And I'm Naira Chahich. Good morning, everyone. It's 8:01 a.m. in London, 9:01 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. And the long-awaited Phase 1 is done, Roger. But how quickly is the market going to start looking to whether we get a Phase 2 or not, and whether actually Phase 1 is even enough at this point?
Well, you kind of get the feeling they've already got there, because the ink was scarcely dry when the markets kind of thought, well, we know what was going to happen. We're not that impressed. I mean, we did see record highs on Wall Street. That is true. Asia distinctly unimpressed, though.
Yeah, certainly. If we look across the markets, which we'll get onto in a second, you could kind of see why, because a number of things have come out in the details of Phase 1 now, but the issues of enforcement and the question becoming as well of that we were discussing yesterday of what China really has to gain from this, and therefore I guess how far they're going to go with the commitments that they've said they'll make in Phase 1.
And one really interesting thing I thought, Naira, I mean, we've talked about the possibility that after China, Donald Trump might have his eyes on some kind of opening up a trade war front with Europe. An interesting line from the Washington Post this morning saying that actually Donald Trump threatened the Europeans with 25% tariffs on car imports if they didn't play ball on Iran in terms of pushing Iran on the nuclear deal. So using trade as a hammer of foreign policy, if that's true, fascinating.
Yeah, and let's not forget as well that in the run-up to the election, there is still the risk of escalation. We've still got tariffs on around two-thirds of Chinese goods going into the US, and it doesn't mean that the imposition of further tariffs is off the table at all at this point as the negotiations on Phase 2 begin. In the meantime, with TSMC, what's really interesting is, chip makers have had a fairly good run of late, generally on sort of the prospects for global growth. But there's maybe not so much of a read across in terms of trade when you look at TSMC. It's all about 5G. We'll get more details on that in a sec. But anyway, a very clear beat across a lot of the numbers for TSMC. More broadly across the markets, as you were saying, Roger, a little bit of just sort of lack of exuberance in the Asian equity session. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index up just 0.2%. It was a little bit of a mixed picture below the surface. That said, we were weaker yesterday, so it was almost as if the negativity started to be priced in yesterday, and today is just a little bit meh in the Asian session. In terms of European equity markets, 3 minutes into the equity market open, the Stock 600 is trading higher by just about 0.1%. Again, a little better than what we saw yesterday when we closed flat, but no big splashes of green on the screen. If we take a look at the FTSE 100, that's flat. The CAC 40 is unchanged. The DAX is up 0.2%. The IBEX goes nowhere. The FTSE MIB up 0.4%. As you said, the S&P 500, another day, another record yesterday. Futures indicate we could build on that in today's session. S&P futures up 0.2%. Dow futures up 0.2%. NASDAQ futures up 0.3%, and of course the Dow yesterday closing above 29,000 for the first time. In terms of the 10-year Treasury yield, we slipped yesterday. We dropped below 180. We hold there now on a 175 handle. The 10-year Bund yield goes nowhere at -20. So generally just a little bit of underwhelm across the markets. The 10-year gilt yield also doesn't move. In terms of what you're looking at in FX, so just to check on the Bloomberg dollar index, that is steady after a touch of weakness yesterday. David Bloom over over at HSBC, still remaining a staunch dollar bull. And taking a look across commodities, you're looking at WTI and Brent a little bit higher. WTI trading at 58.09, Brent at 64.27. So a little bit firmer in the oil markets, perhaps on the trade deal, because in terms of the stockpiles, the API data showed those supplies rising. So that would have put a downward pressure on oil. So maybe oil sort of joining the risk on, gold pulling back just a touch.
Okay, let's have a look at what the stocks are to watch this morning. And Bloomberg's Morwenna Coniam joins us on the line from Dublin. So good morning to you, Morwenna. Now, we heard earlier, I was talking to Naira about TSMC's earnings, but how are European chip stocks doing generally?
Well, yeah, generally that sector is responding very positively to the news out of Taiwan Semiconductor, which of course is Apple's main chip maker overnight. So they raised their profit and revenue. Their profit and revenue outlook beat expectations, and there's been quite a lot of positivity after the shares have opened from the likes of Infineon, AMS, ST Micro, Dialog Semiconductor. They are all rising this morning, and the sector, the European technology sector, is up 0.3% at the moment as overall.
Okay, now, we're at a period in the UK, of course, of very high employment, record high employment, in fact. How are Hayes recruiters doing? Because they brought some of their results out.
Yeah, not very well at all, unfortunately. In fact, the shares are currently down about 8.5% this morning. They reported net fees on a comparative basis down 4%. A year ago, they rose 9%, so really quite a downturn. And it's really just overall macroeconomic factors around Europe and Australia. So Germany, you've got some economic uncertainty. In the UK, there's obviously been a lot of political uncertainty recently with regards to Brexit and an election. And then, in Australia, even the bushfires have had an impact, and that's something the CEO is calling out this morning, and analysts expecting consensus estimates to fall significantly on this update. And we're also seeing some downturn in other recruiters, the likes of Page Group and Robert Waters this morning too.
Okay, well, we often report bad news from the high street, Morwenna, but AB Foods and Primark, well, they seem to be implying something rather different.
Yeah, I mean, in contrast, we're seeing quite a strong response there this morning. Shares currently up about 3%, and it seems really that Primark has done very well, perhaps as people are looking to go at a different end of the high street. Germany has been highlighted as a particular strong performance, and the UK has been holding up too. Sales for the 16-week period reported were up 4.5% year on year at constant currencies, and so really was that Eurozone and a notable improvement in Germany.
All right, Morwenna, thanks very much indeed. Morwenna Coniam there joining us on the line with stocks to watch this morning.
Now, the US and China have signed the preliminary stage of a trade deal. During a ceremony at the White House, President Trump called the signing of the deal a momentous step.
So China has made substantial and enforceable commitments regarding the protection of American ideas, trade secrets, patents, and trademarks. China has also pledged firm action to confront pirated and counterfeit goods, which is a big problem for many of the people in the room.
As the president outlined, the deal commits China to cracking down on technology theft. It also outlines a $200 billion spending spree to close the trade imbalance and binds Beijing as well to avoiding currency manipulation to gain an advantage, and does include an enforcement system to ensure promises are kept.
So all that's in the deal, but the new pact's already been criticised for what isn't. Stefan Selig served as Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade under President Obama, and speaking to Bloomberg, he says many of the big issues in the relationship were left for the next phase.
Given the amount of time that it took to get these more modest accommodations accomplished, 3 years with a lot of drama, I think it is highly unlikely we get that, certainly during the pendency of this administration. And don't forget, the things that are left to do that theoretically would be in phase 2 or phase 3 really are at the heart of the Chinese economy and the Chinese Communist Party, which is the state control of their economy.
Well, Chinese leader Xi Jinping says the deal proves the two sides can work together to bridge their differences, and he declared it good for China, the US, and the whole world.
But another thing that was included in the signing of a trade deal with the US is that China will speed up the opening of its $21 trillion capital market to investment banks such as Goldman Sachs. The date has been brought up by 8 months to April. Goldman and rivals, including JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley, will now be allowed to apply to form fully owned units to do a broad array of investment banking and securities dealing in China.
But a sidelight on Greater China, hedge fund manager Carl Bass is convinced Hong Kong is headed for a financial crisis.
You're going to see a full-scale banking crisis in Hong Kong because you've got such a tightly wound economy in a stage of free fall from an economic perspective.
But it's a widely read story on the terminal this morning. But his warning doesn't seem to be convincing markets. Few doubt Hong Kong's economy is suffering after months of unrest. But the city's markets have shown little sign of an impending banking collapse. And full disclosure, Bass has been shorting the Hong Kong dollar for a while. He's staying away from stocks as he believes the authorities might step in to halt short selling.
Now, in the UK, BOE chief economist Andy Haldane says the cost of Britain's productivity crisis is already multiples of even the worst-case Brexit scenario. The flatlining since the financial crash is the single most pressing issue for the economy. He prescribes improving pay and working conditions such as security, training, progression and engagement at the bottom of the labour market.
And in earnings news, Wall Street's debt trading surge continues as Goldman Sachs joins that party. The bank's fixed income traders posted a 63% jump in revenue in the fourth quarter, but despite the strong showing, profits at Goldman dropped 24%, falling short of analyst estimates, as the lender bolstered its litigation reserves by the most in 4 years. Now today, Morgan Stanley reports its fourth quarter earnings.
Those are your top stories. For the latest in global news, here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin has replaced his long-serving Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev with a little-known head of the tax service. Bloomberg's Henry Mayer says he has called for sweeping constitutional changes,
fueling speculation that the Russian leader is moving to extend his grip on power beyond the end of his term in 2024. The constitution now requires Putin to step down as president then, but he could take on another post to ensure his continued influence. In Moscow, Henry Mayer, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
In the U.S., the House has sent 2 articles of impeachment to the Senate as a first step to begin President Trump's trial. That is all but certain to end in acquittal. A major majority of senators would be needed to convict the president. Chief Justice John Roberts will preside over the trial with the Senate as a jury. The trial will begin next Tuesday. In Germany, Angela Merkel has reached a deal to begin phasing out coal. The talks set out a timetable for shutting down coal-fired power generation by 2038. As part of the deal with Germany's coal-producing states, the government will provide 40 billion euros of regional infrastructure. And Hong Kong is behind on its taxes. Hundreds of thousands of residents are still waiting in January for their salaries tax bills, which normally would have started landing in mailboxes in July. Bloomberg's Eric Lam reports.
Instead, the holdup is due to a legislative backlog linked to the ongoing protests that have rocked Hong Kong for the last 7 months. Only about 1/3 of tax assessments for individuals have been made. The government is further ahead when it comes to corporate taxes, having assessed 77% of profits tax returns. Hong Kong is expected to face its first budget deficit since the early 2000s, and delays in receiving tax payments could make the existing shortfall worse. In Hong Kong, Eric Lam, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, coming up, we'll get more details on Phase 1. It's done with key provisions on IP theft and efforts to close the trade gap seen as positives. But a lot of questions remain, and what happens before we move on to Phase 2? In terms of the market reaction, we saw US stocks hit records yesterday, but a little bit of a subdued reaction today. Asia was trading mixed 13 minutes into the equity market and open in Europe. We're dead flat on the Stock 600, a second day of no movement either way. A little bit underwhelming in equities. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SCI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/C's change.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with The Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
A new year, new tech trends, and Deloitte has released their look at what's going to define the sector in the future. They see technology being the #1 differentiator that includes ethical technology and trust, as well as emotional AI. To tell us more is the author of the report and Deloitte Consulting CTO, Bill Briggs. Bill, loved the talk trends for 2020. The first one really stood out to me, highlighting digital twins. How do you see sort of bridging the gap between both the physical and the digital aspects of technology?
Yeah, Taylor, thanks for having me. And you hit on it, the fact that we're bringing them together. And a lot of times people think of technology trends and think it's got to be product-facing, market-facing, customer-facing. And what I love is that one puts front and center the importance of the back office. How do we think about applying emerging technology into things like the supply chain, and then in broader industries beyond just industrial manufacturing, where digital twins have had a great run over the last 10 years or so. It's being applied to different industries now.
Where do you see the future industries? What industries?
Yeah, well, take life sciences and healthcare. We're applying it into complete health systems. How do we think about hospital networks, how they run? How do we think about physical health in itself and broad treatment, which is not traditionally where we thought digital twins would apply.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff. Time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash, and we've just had some breaking news that the German government is going to be paying RWE around 2.6 billion euros because of their exit from coal. Of course, crucially, Angela Merkel yesterday met with the premiers of some of the big coal states, and they agreed to help with this exit from the dirtiest fossil fuel. RWE, very importantly, Germany's biggest polluter, for a bit of context there. Now, over to the First Word breaking news desk in Berlin for today's morning call and all the other market news. Here's Richard Jones.
Good morning, Sandra. It's been a mixed session for Asian equities, with the Nikkei 225 closing lower by 0.1%. This Kospi up 0.8, the Hang Seng up 0.4, and the Shanghai Composite down by 0.5%. The E-mini S&P and E-mini Nasdaq futures are trading higher, up by 2 and 0.3% respectively. European equities are mixed at the open, with the Euro Stoxx 50, the DAX, and the CAC 40 all up about 0.1%, with the FTSE 100 trading down by 0.2. Turning to the bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is steady at 1.79%, with the 10-year German bond yield down a basis point, trading at minus 0.21%. In the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is little changed, with most G10 currency pairs trading in relatively tight ranges. Looking at the European event risk calendar, we've already had German final CPI for December come out in line with expectations, and we look ahead to the Bank of England bank liabilities and credit conditions surveys, in addition to the release of the account of the ECB's December meeting and the Norges Bank's fourth quarter lending survey. As for central bank speakers, Christine Lagarde speaks in Frankfurt this evening at 7 p.m. local time. That's it from me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the terminal. Sandra?
Thanks, Richard. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now back to you guys. Naira and Roger.
Let's get back to our top story. Thank you, Sandra and Richard Jones. Now, getting back to that, the Phase 1 trade deal has now been signed. President Trump says the accord is righting the wrongs of the past, with Beijing agreeing to do more to crack down on theft of American intellectual property and avoid currency manipulation.
No, we seem to. We were going to listen to, I think, Donald Trump there, but Donald Trump doesn't seem to be around.
No problem. I'll move on. That said, the deal does nothing to address U.S. complaints of Chinese-backed hacking of American companies or require reform of state subsidies. For more, let's go live to Beijing, where Bloomberg's Deputy Bureau Chief, James Mager, is standing by. So, James, the big question here is one of enforcement. What exactly has China promised, and how will it be enforced?
There's a lot of different promises in the trade deal that was signed. The big headline numbers that we're seeing is that China is promising to buy up to $200 billion worth of extra U.S. products over the next couple of years, so this year and next year. And there's also a lot of promises on things like intellectual property protection, allowing American companies to get into the Chinese financial services market, for example. And there's also some other promises on actions on the currency. The question, there's a number of questions around each of those. The first one about the purchases is, how is China actually going to buy an extra $200 billion? And is that going to mean that they buy less from other countries? There's a lot of people who say the commodities markets and agricultural markets are very suspicious that really China can actually come through on those promises. But if they don't, there is an enforcement mechanism in the deal. There's a committee, or there's some kind of committees that will meet to discuss problems. If China has a problem with the US or the US problem with China, they can meet and discuss that. And then there seems to be further steps that can be taken. And I guess if everything goes very badly, there can be tariffs imposed by either side in the future. But again, that's it's very unclear from the deal how all that would exactly work. But some of the things that China has also promised to do, like financial services market opening up, are already things they were going to do anyway. Some of that's been brought forward, but for the most part, it's China's promising to do things that it had already planned to do. So a lot of these promises from China aren't exactly new or surprising, to people who've been watching this.
And James, one of the big questions, obviously, is what isn't in it and why it isn't in it. I think people have been drawing attention to state subsidies, but also the issue of China's state hacking of U.S. interests, even U.S. government departments. That's pretty serious. These are key issues, aren't they?
That's right. There's nothing about state subsidies. The U.S., the EU, and Japan just got together this week to try and raise a WTO, raise the issue of state subsidies, specifically Chinese state subsidies, at the WTO. So that issue is not going away. But it wasn't involved. It wasn't in the deal, because it's just such a difficult issue for China and the U.S. to negotiate on. China fundamentally doesn't want to change the structure of its economy and how the government acts in industrial markets, and how it subsidizes companies that it thinks are going to be important. So the Chinese don't want to negotiate on that, and it was just too difficult to get that included in this deal. And again, on hacking, China denies that it hacks, that the government hacks U.S. companies. It denies that it is involved in industrial espionage. So to have included that in the deal would have required a massive change in the Chinese government stance on that. And again, I guess it was just too hard for them to get that done in this time frame. And those are the kind of issues like state subsidies, like and possibly hacking as well, which led to the collapse of the previous deal that was almost signed in May of last year.
James, consensus seems to be coalescing around describing what's happened as a truce. So the question then becomes, what is Phase 2 going to look like if it does actually come? Because the risk of escalation and further tariffs being put on hasn't completely gone away, has it?
No, and outside the narrow confines of trade, for example, there's a lot of other things that are still going on, and a lot of things that are raising tensions between these two countries. The US is still trying very hard to stop Huawei from being able to deploy its 5G technology around the world, and really it's trying to stop US companies and all foreign companies really from doing any business with Huawei, essentially to drive it out of business. It's also trying to stop China from developing a semiconductor industry. So the US is currently blocking a a Dutch company called ASML from selling a machine to the Chinese that will be used to make new computer chips. And so that kind of, these are really, those are partly trade issues, partly not trade issues, but that kind of technology war, I guess, that's going on between the two countries is going to continue, and really this trade deal has done nothing to sort of solve those issues. And then, there are the other issues where we mentioned, like state hacking, like Chinese subsidies, all these other things as well. These will continue to go on. Whether these can be negotiated in a phase 2 deal or not, or whether there is really a phase 2 deal that's going to happen, and what that looks like is anyone's guess. I mean, Donald Trump has indicated that might not come till after the election. Steve Mnuchin was said a few days ago there could be a 2A, a 2B, and a 2C deal. So
could be a long way to go with this one.
It could be a long way to go. Hopefully, we'll get a little bit of a break now, but this is going to continue.
Thanks very much, James Mager. There live on the line from Beijing. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Target struck out over the holidays, posting a less than 1.5% gain in same-store sales from a year ago. But the two biggest kids on the retail block have yet to come to the plate. Amazon and Walmart will report their quarterly results in the coming weeks. We'll get more information about the holiday season later today in the government's December retail sales report. Economists surveyed by Bloomberg see a 0.3% increase from November. Stocks are coming off a modestly higher session. The major averages closed at or near record highs as investors considered the details of the Phase 1 trade deal between the U.S. and China. Toyota is making a nearly $400 million investment in Joby Aviation. It's one of a handful of companies chasing the seemingly implausible goal of making electric air taxis that shuttle people over crowded streets and highways. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Witham offers VC expertise to address the advisory, audit, and tax needs of your investments.
I'm Chris DeMeo, Witham's Technology and Emerging Growth Services practice leader. The venture capital community continues to thrive in an era of disruption, fueling the growth of some of the greatest innovations over the last 25 years. Witham's Technology and Emerging Growth Services team services a variety of different venture-backed startups, lending predictive support and deep service experience, adding value to your portfolio.
Visit Witham.com/VC for more information.
Business is constantly...
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Give same old a shake-up. Give it some gusto. Give your 4-dish repertoire the 40-dish treatment with all the ingredients you need delivered to your door. Give it new flavours to try, like creamy haddock linguine with tomato and chilli. Give everybody a hearty plateful from just £2.98 each. Give it weekly dinners sorted. Go on, give it some gusto. Visit gusto.co.uk today and get 50% off your first box. Subscription auto-renews, cancel anytime.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, has Silicon Valley changed since all the revelations about the world's social media companies?
I think people are really reluctant to relinquish this narrative of being underdogs, of being innovators, of just trying to experiment and make the world better.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chahich, making Roger Hearing jump.
Yes, as she often does. I'm Roger Hearing. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Oh, it's good to be with you, Roger. 30 minutes into the equity market open. We're seeing a little bit of a jump, actually, in the stock 600. Speaking of that, maybe that's what you were reacting to. In positive territory, up 0.2% after we closed flat yesterday. The Asian equity markets were a little bit underwhelmed with phase one, but of course there was a run-up in global equities ahead of it with another record in the S&P 500. You've got utilities, commodity producers and banks leading the gains on the stock 600. Most industry groups in the green. Looking across regional equity benchmarks, FTSE 100 flat, the CAC 40 up 0.3%, the DAX and IBEX up at least 0.4%, the FTSE MIB up 0.7%. US futures pointing to a session that might build on the record yesterday. The Dow, of course, closing above 29,000 for the first time ever as well. S&P futures up 0.3%, Dow futures up by the same, Nasdaq futures leading slightly up 0.4%. The 10-year Treasury yield slipped a little yesterday, went below 180, and we hold just below that now, though we edge up a basis point. The 10-year Bund yield is going nowhere at -20. The 10-year gilt yield also steady on a 66 handle. In FX, looking across G10, you're seeing a touch of dollar weakness come through. Most G10 currencies gaining against the dollar, led by the New Zealand and Kiwi dollars. The pound also on the front foot, up 0.2%. And looking at commodities, you're seeing oil slightly firmer. This despite stockpiles data showing a gain. So it looks like oil perhaps reflecting a little bit of risk on. WTI at 58.09, Brent at 64.31. Roger.
Right, let's have a look at some of our top stories. Now, the US and China have signed the preliminary stage of a trade deal, but many of the big issues in the relationship were left for the next phase. The deal commits China to cracking down on technology theft. It also outlines a $200 billion spending spree to close the trade imbalance. Speaking exclusively to Bloomberg, Dallas Fed President Robert Kaplan said the trade tensions with China won't go away after the deal is signed.
We're going to have trade issues with China for years, but a phase one deal is much better than the alternative, which would have been continue the September tariffs in place and escalating tariffs.
President Trump called the signing of the deal a momentous step, but he also said he's keeping existing tariffs as leverage for the next round of negotiations.
Meanwhile, the trade deal means China will open the door to global investment banks earlier than expected. Goldman Sachs and other firms will now be allowed to apply to start fully owned units there in April. The previous timeline called for applications in December.
Now, in earnings news, Taiwan Semiconductor posted a bigger-than-expected rise in profit. That's after customers from Apple to Huawei adopted more advanced chips in their smartphones. The robust results demonstrate how TSMC is investing in new chip technologies to safeguard its market lead. The company hopes the emergence of 5G will underpin its business for the next few years.
And the surge in Wall Street's debt trading has continued with Goldman Sachs. The bank's fixed-income traders posted a 63% jump in revenue in the fourth quarter. But despite the strong showing, profits dropped 24% as Goldman bolstered its litigation reserves.
OK, well, let's delve into this on US banks with Bloomberg reporter Danny Berger, who's joined us in the studio. So, Danny, first of all, fixed income. Obviously, it's a bright spot. How did the trade numbers of Bank of America and Goldman stack up against what have been pretty spectacular ones for their peers?
Well, the trend definitely continued with Goldman and Bank of America that we heard yesterday. The average over the four banks that have reported so far is about a 56 increase in FICC trading. However, I will say that JP Morgan and Citi did surpass expectations. They had a stronger recovery than most of their rivals. Bank of America, we saw a 63% increase. That compares to the staggering 87% from JP Morgan. I mean, it was hard for really any bank to post a number that monumentous. And then we saw Bank of America, its trading revenue climbed about 13% in the fourth quarter. So better than analysts were expecting, but the bar was just set so high. It was really difficult for banks to stack up. And I should say when it comes to equity trading, we also saw that do better at Citi and JP Morgan. Equity trading looked weaker when it comes to the two we heard from yesterday.
Yeah, and the thing with trading is you can't really predict how it's going to pan out in future quarters. And of course, you had the comparables of a terrible fourth quarter of 2018. But also for Goldman Sachs and Bank of America, Danny, the sheen was taken off a little bit for Goldman Sachs with a litigation charge and for Bank of America with a consumer unit.
Right. I mean, that $1.1 billion litigation charge is definitely hefty. You know, they're wrapping up right now their 1MDB scandal settlement. And Bank of America, I mean, we just increasingly see how much their earnings are tied to interest rates. The net interest pressure really, really crushed them this quarter. And the expectations that we heard from executives was it's going to continue to be a pressure in 2020. And when you have just their earnings so dictated by that, even when you get better FIC results, it's no wonder that we saw Bank of America shares decline in yesterday's session.
Yeah, because it is the macro environment, which obviously interest rates are part of. I mean, are they expecting any kind of improvement in that? I mean, what's their macro outlook?
So Bank of America, they definitely seem pretty positive about U.S. consumers and just business outlook in general. The CFO there did say that he thinks it's getting a little better overseas and sees expectations for rising growth. Goldman saw growth about 2%. Roger, I know we were talking about this earlier, but I mean, I love the language that Goldman used. They said that there's going to be a slight improvement on corporate sentiment. It's constructive, a relatively benign economic environment. So, I mean, some soft words here to describe what 2020 is going to look like, but they didn't say it would be awful. So at least there's that.
Yeah, and Goldman also talked about their Uber stake in the call. What details did we learn there?
Right, so Uber has completely exited its Uber position. You'll recall that they raised about $100 million for the Uber IPO, one of the lead bankers on it. So when the lockup expired, Goldman sold their shares. And it's really been one of the worst performing Goldman IPOs in recent history. Shares continually trade below the IPO price. It really has not done well. So I think that says something when you had this IPO Goldman at first was so bullish about. Fast forward to now and they've completely exited.
You could say they called a cab and left. Danny, thanks very much. Danny Berger there.
Let's get to the world news now with Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. The German government is paying RWE around 2.6 billion euros to exit coal. This Chancellor Angela Merkel secures a deal to begin phasing out the dirty fossil fuel. RWE is Europe's biggest carbon dioxide emitter. It previously announced it wanted to become carbon neutral by 2040. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin has replaced his long-serving prime minister. He's also calling for sweeping changes to the country's constitution. The move fuels speculation the Russian leader is moving to extend his grip on power. Currently, his presidential term ends in 2024, but he could take on another post to ensure his continued influence. In the Philippines, police are vacating towns and cities near the erupting volcano. Bloomberg's Andrea Colonzo says this comes as the intensity of the eruption has somewhat weakened.
Weak emissions were observed in the volcano for the past 24 hours, but the hazardous explosive eruption is still possible within hours to days, the Philippine Volcanology Agency said Thursday. Another evacuee has died of cardiac arrest, as more than 82,000 people were moved to safer ground. In Manila, Andrea Calonzo, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And a pneumonia outbreak reported in China less than 3 weeks ago has now widened. Japan has confirmed its first case of the SARS-like virus. Bloomberg's Jason Gale has this story.
The man in his 30s had a fever when he returned to Japan after spending time with an infected person in Wuhan, health authorities said Thursday. He was hospitalized with pneumonia on January 10 and discharged with a mild cough 5 days later. No infections among healthcare workers have been reported, and there is no clear evidence of sustained human-to-human transmission, the World Health Organization said. In Melbourne, Jason Gale, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, thank you. Let's get the latest sport now with George Alderman.
Manchester United progressed to the fourth round of the FA Cup with a 1-0 win over Wolves in their replay at Old Trafford last night. But the victory came at a cost, with Marcus Rashford going off injured shortly after coming on as a second-half substitute. Wolves were denied a goal by VAR. Their first-half effort was ruled out for a handball in the build-up. Boss Nuno Espirito Santo doesn't seem too impressed with the technology.
I didn't see the images yet, but that's VAR. Even us are afraid to celebrate. We don't celebrate no more. That's what's going on. Then Old Trafford celebrates an own goal. So it's VAR. Something's wrong.
United will play either Watford or Tranmere next. Cardiff will meet Reading after winning a thriller with Carlisle 4-3. And England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland will all discover their opponents when the draw for the 2021 Rugby League World Cup is made at Buckingham Palace this lunchtime. Prince Harry will conduct the draw.
That's your European sport. Coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, Fiona Frick, CEO at Unigestion, will join us in the studio. Of course, as always, you can listen back to a selection of our interviews at BloombergRadio.com or on your Bloomberg Business app. Lots to discuss in terms of whether the paradigm has shifted at all for Fiona, given phase one is now done. I mean, markets already moving on to the prospect or not of phase two.
I think a sense perhaps they'd already priced in what this was.
Yes.
And the question really of whether something comes next. The general suggestion is not this side of the election. So we've got a whole election year in the US to get through first. And who knows where that might take the China relationship, not least because Donald Trump may well use it in his election campaign. Indeed, I think that's probably what he's intending to do. This is Daybreak Europe. This is Bloomberg.
Okay, kids, Dad's gonna teach you how to dance. First, spread your feet apart. Then, pump your knee, nod your head, shake your hips, and bite your lip ever so slightly. Now, with one hand in the air, point at people with the other hand. I call that the rock star.
Dance like a dad. It's a great way to make a moment with your kids.
Now, make a face like it just smells something bad.
Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
In the world of financial advice, speed, clarity, and foresight aren't just nice to have, they're required to survive. Adipar provides advisors the real-time portfolio reporting and insights required to realize the goals and personal potential for their clients. Trusted by thousands of wealth advisors, from family offices, RIAs, and large financial institutions, Adipar helps you make better, more informed investment decisions. To learn more, visit us at addepar.com.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIP.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
The NBA is on TuneIn Premium. Each week, TuneIn picks an NBA game you just can't miss. LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and the Lakers are in Houston to take on James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and the Rockets.
LeBron, turn the corner! Slam dunk LeBron!
Harden steps left. He shoots for three, and that goes in.
This Saturday, the Los Angeles Lakers are at the Houston Rockets. Tip-off is at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Search NBA to follow your favorite NBA team today.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
NFL Conference Championship Weekend is live on TuneIn, starting Sunday at 3:05 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss the Tennessee Titans and the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship.
Gets to the goal line, in for the touchdown!
Then, starting at 6:40 p.m. Eastern, hear the Green Bay Packers and San Francisco 49ers clash for the NFC crown.
Shotgun snap, hand off to Jones, knifes in over the left guard, touchdown!
At home or on the go, don't miss a second of playoff action with TuneIn Premium. Search Premium to upgrade.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marshawn scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Hello, I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show, American football, British accent. Add to your favorites and listen on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, European equities are mostly higher this morning. We're seeing the Stock 600 currently up 0.3%, the FTSE fairly flat here in London, but the DAX up 0.3%. Similarly so for the CAC 40 in Paris. It follows a bit of a mixed trading day in Asia. Markets not reacting much to the signing of a phase 1 trade deal. That said, we are seeing US futures pointing slightly higher. Treasuries holding on to yesterday's gains, ticking higher by a basis point to 1.79%. 10-year Bund yields meanwhile holding at a negative 20 basis points. 10-year gilt yields also flat at 66 basis points. Now, in currencies, it's all about the Kiwi. New Zealand's dollar rising against all its major peers after better than expected inflation and retail spending data this morning. The Kiwi currently up 0.4% against the greenback. Most other currencies in fairly tight ranges this morning. The yuan holding near its July highs of 6.88. We're seeing the yen down 0.1% at 110. The Bloomberg dollar spot index is unchanged, but sterling is bid up 0.2%. This this amid growing expectations for a Bank of England rate cut later this month. In commodities, I am keeping a fairly close eye on agriculture products like corn, wheat and soybeans. They're all lower again today. China pledging to buy almost $95 billion worth of U.S. commodities as part of the Phase 1 trade deal, but the market seems to be unconvinced of that. That said, oil is enjoying a bit of a trade boost. WTI up 0.7% at $58 a barrel. That's Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Dan Garens with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Emmanuel Macron's retreat from a plan to raise the full benefit retirement age doesn't seem to have eased anger over pension reforms. Labour unions are calling for new strikes across the nation next week. They are calling for a massive day of demonstrations on January the 24th. Pensioners and other savers may join. The planet is warming faster than at any time in human history. That's according to 5 major independent assessments of global temperature. 2019 was the second hottest year in the 140 years of recorded data. The decade was also the hottest ever, the 4th in a row to set a new record. And Hong Kong and Rio de Janeiro have topped a list of the most expensive cities for wealthy spenders. High tax rates in Brazil and pricey fine dining in Hong Kong are largely to blame. That's according to Julius Baer's Global Wealth and Lifestyle Report 2020. And while Hong Kong may have dropped in future rankings after months of protest do take their toll on the economy, other Asian cities are well represented in their ranking, including Shanghai, Tokyo, Singapore, Taipei and Bangkok. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Interesting, Leanne, does London feature anywhere high in that list at all?
You know what?
It's number 7.
It is
I can
number
tell you.
7.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm having a look now.
I've just had a look. So it's
Yes.
London, Vienna.
Yeah, and there are some
Vancouver.
surprises, actually, I have to say. Mexico City's sort of in the top 20 anyway.
But I was just having a look at a few pictures of some fine dining in Hong Kong. I was doing a bit of research.
Yes.
Gosh, it does look pretty amazing. On a yacht, you can go for the most wonderful meal.
Yeah, and the great thing with having a yacht there, if everything goes horribly wrong, you can sail away.
Yes, maybe
You
not
never know.
quickly,
You
but
never
you can.
know.
You
Well,
can.
well,
Into the sunset,
if
Roger.
Kyle Bass is right, you might have to.
All right. Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans with the World News. Now, our guest in the studio, we're delighted to say, is Fiona Frick, CEO at Unigestion, joining Roger and myself here today. Welcome, Fiona, and great to have you on the show today. We've got a Phase 1. It's done. The question then becomes, how much more of a rally can we see in global equities if this is where we end with a truce without moving on to Phase 2?
So thank you for having me first. I would say that most of the news is already in the market.
Yeah.
And the rally we had started when we saw that there was going to be a potential trade one deal that was in the Q4 last year and then continued, and now we have it. So I would say the news is in the market. I think it's a good news, in fact, because it shows that at least the country has stabilized their relationship. Nevertheless, a lot of things will have to be negotiated in Phase 2. And with valuation and market sentiment being very positive today, some bad surprise could have an impact in the market.
And, I mean, what are the kind of surprises that there might be on there? I mean, not just, I guess, necessarily in the relationship itself, but there's plenty of headwinds around, and not least, of course, I suppose, the US election year.
Yes, absolutely. And I think a trade 2 deal will not take place before the election. And it's not necessary that if there is a change of president, that the influence of America about negotiating a deal with China will be less optimist. So I think even with a Democratic president, there will be negotiation that will be tough with the Chinese.
You say that discrimination across and within assets will likely be critical in 2020. What sort of market dislocations are you seeing at the moment that investors could potentially take opportunities in or profit from in 2020?
So the beauty is that everything has been going up, but because of the beauty of market cap indices, there's some sectors that have been going up more than others, and some sectors which have been more forgotten. And so typically if you take equities, technology has been doing extremely well, while perhaps some value sectors has done quite poorly. If you take countries, you see US has done extremely well, and sits now, I think, in its 90th decile of expensiveness. And in comparison, you have markets like Europe or emerging market, which has done less well. So I think in terms of relative trades, you still have things to arbitrage, perhaps.
What about fixed income? Where do you see bonds going in 2020?
We think bonds are expensive. So the beauty is, in the past, bond was a sort of insurance where you get a premium because you get a coupon. Today, bonds is at least an insurance, but you don't get a coupon anymore. So it's a change of paradigm that investors have to take notice of, and they have to find new ways to construct protection in their portfolios through new kind of diversification, because bonds will perhaps not be as defensive as they used to be in the past if there is a macro shock.
Will central banks, and I'm talking mainly about the Fed and ECB here, will them staying on hold through 2020 be enough to keep equity and bond markets supported, or do we actually need to see dovish surprises or growth surprising to the upside?
I think it's quite interesting. If you look from, I think, 1960 something to 2008, 1969 to 2069 to 2008, the performance of equity markets in average was around 6%. If you look from 2008 to last year, I think the average is around 11%. So you could say that the central bank put, or the central bank effect on the market was around 5%. I think this was an extraordinary period for equity market that will not happen in the future. There is obviously less margin to maneuver for the central banks, and most of the moves have been done last year. This year, I think there will be accommodative, but or at least still. So I think if there is a growth in the market, it will have to come because earnings are getting better, because the growth last year of the market was mainly PE expansion.
Now, you said the margin of manoeuvre is limited for central banks. That's kind of taken on board. But the push towards, particularly the ECB, towards fiscal action, the Germans being the obvious one, they have a huge surplus. Christine Lagarde would dearly like them to use it. What prospect do you think there is realistically of that in the coming year?
So the problem is it's not the central bank that can decide that the country takes fiscal policy. So the central bank has been saying for years now, and even with Draghi, that they've done their part of the job, and now they set the country to do their job in terms of fiscal policy. I think there is, even in Germany, a sense that this could happen because Germany economy is not going well. It's an economy which is very dependent on its manufacturing. Manufacturing is the part of the economy which has the most issues. So yeah, we could see some sort of fiscal policy coming into play. Something which was considered like a bad word in Germany a few years ago is becoming more acceptable.
Yeah, Fiona, a lot of people I speak to say the place where we're most likely to see fiscal at the moment, certainly in Europe, is in the UK. At the same time, though, you've got a rush of bets on an imminent BOE rate cut. Markets pricing in a more than 60% chance of a rate cut this month. Do you think that's likely to come from the Bank of England this year, as some of the Brexit risk has cleared to a certain extent?
Yeah, I think it's likely. The Brexit risk has cleared. You see that growth has been negative. Inflation numbers are not high. So yes, it is clearly a possibility, I think. But the funny thing is that the market price is at 60%. A few days ago, it was pricing much lower. So the odds has been going up quite quickly on that one.
I suppose the one question is, will it be likely? The other question is, will it be effective? Will it make much difference?
That's the big question. And it's not only for the BOE. It's like, what QE has shown and interest rates going down so quickly has shown is that it can be a source of inequality in the market, and therefore because it makes people that have money even more money, and people that need to save more. So it was a necessity to do it, but I think is it really useful going forward? I don't think it will be really what will bring growth back to the market.
Fiona, you don't see a great risk of recession in the near future. Do you see much inflation risk? I know the market's not pricing it.
No, not necessarily neither. Neither recession, but more deceleration that we'll need to keep in the loop, because things can vary, but no inflation, that's for sure. That's why we see central bank being accommodative for the year, and we remain marginally positive on growth assets.
All right, Fiona, thank you very much. Fiona Frick there, CEO at Unigestion, joining us live in the London studio. And coming up, Anna Edwards and Matt Miller are back on Daybreak Europe. They're going to be speaking to Simon French, Chief Economist at Panmure Gordon. This is Bloomberg.
Investors who put their money on the line to help build U.S. infrastructure deserve to be protected. That's what we do at BAM. Our unconditional guarantee means investors.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
I've always loved a kitchen experiment, especially smoothies. I've blended all sorts of mad combinations. Strawberry and charcoal, broccoli and chocolate. Not my best, that. But when I test blenders in the Witch Lab, it's not about flavour, it's about performance. Our tests use proper tough stuff, hard ice, strong veg, rough nuts. And the blenders that can hack it are the only ones we recommend for your kitchen.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
What we're now seeing for the first time is this facade of absolute unity beginning to break down in the EU.
We expect that there will be some type of slowdown recession beyond 2019.
The European banking system, although recovering, hasn't recovered, and there are areas of fragility.
We've seen this before, trade talks that lead nowhere, and then tariffs. We just swing from one to the other, and markets get caught in the middle.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe with Anna Edwards and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And from Berlin, I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London, DAB Digital Radio.
Let me just get to some breaking news across the Bloomberg. A red headline that tells me that Iraq oil supply is vulnerable as Middle East tensions flare. This according to the IEA. So we were waiting for a report from the International Energy Agency this morning on Iraq.
That's incredible. So they're saying that the oil supply in Iraq is vulnerable.
Are you being sarcastic?
Well, come on. That's so
I just wanted to
obvious.
establish that for our global viewers, global listeners. Yes. Global markets have a solid base, though. I think it's the detail behind this, I'm sure, that is of interest to people in the oil markets. But the headline does seem a little fairly obvious that it is vulnerable. But they say Iraqi exports doubled in the last decade to 4 million barrels a day, and markets generally have a solid base to endure any supply shocks. And I suppose we've seen that, haven't we, recently, when you look at what's happened to Brent back down at $64 a barrel after the spike we saw higher in last September on the attack on Saudi facilities, and then more recently with the Iran tensions, oil spiking up around the $70 a barrel mark, and now back down around 64 where it was in the middle of December. So that's the latest news flow. Take it for what it's worth, Matt. The latest news flow on the oil story. Let me get to the other markets then, because we need to update everybody on where we are on the global equity story. We're up by 0.4% on the Stock 600. And Matt, you were making the valid point, though, earlier on Bloomberg TV, that you're not necessarily seeing the gains coming through in the sectors that you might have expected. We have US futures leading us higher, it would seem, because we're up by between 3 and 0.5% on US futures at the moment. But the Stock 600 is higher. The FTSE 100 is flat. The German market is doing very well. It's up by 0.4%. But it's actually what seems to fly in the face of what I just described with German outperformers is that we see autos and auto parts as one of the worst performing sectors, and oil and gas and basic resources, typically supportive of London, to the upside as the best performing sectors. So there's some interesting dynamics at play today in terms of what is leading this rally, but a rally we do have. The Asian equity session was a little bit more muted, up by 0.2% on the MSCI Asia Pacific. The oil price we've checked already, 64.63 is where we are on Brent. 1.79 is the yield on the US 10-year, so 1.79%, and the dollar flat to negative this morning. We see the pound up around 0.1%. Ongoing conversation, though, about when we get to a rate cut. Will it be as soon as the end of this month here in the UK?
All right, so there's your data. We check it for you every 15 minutes, and also, well, ending with a question on a rate cut. Let's get that question answered. We bring in Simon French right now. He's the chief economist at Panmure Gordon. And before we get to the phase one trade deal, it's the big story today. We've been waiting for it for months and years. Let me go ahead and pose to you Anna's question. Should we be expecting a rate cut from the Bank of England?
It's pretty much a coin toss at the moment. I think there's a couple of things for investors to look out for over the next week to 10 days that will determine whether the dovish commentary that we've heard in the last 4 or 5 days from Bank of England members, including the Governor Mark Carney, but some of the external members as well, translate into a rate cut on the 30th of January. The first thing to look out for is on the 24th of January, we'll get the flash PMI for the UK economy. Most people expect a quite significant bounce from the December levels because of the certainty or the increased certainty that comes from the general election result. Then also we'll start to see whether some of the soft data, survey-based data, translates into hard economic data, and whether that will convince some of the wavering members of the MPC to just hold fire. I think they should hold fire. I think they probably will hold fire, but the market is far from convinced and thinks they might go for a 25 bip cut just to provide a shot in the arm to a UK economy that's been slowing for a while.
It would be a busy time to do it, wouldn't it? With Brexit literally looming the day after, it would almost have some added symbolism perhaps, and people would read all sorts into that politically perhaps. But Simon, also on the agenda will be a fiscal programme from the UK government, and obviously the Bank of England just has to take that when they get it, and that's not coming until later on in the spring.
Correct. The 11th of March is the date for the budget, but the Bank of England haven't got too much of an excuse to plead ignorance about the fiscal plans. We do already know that day-to-day spending by the UK government is going to go up by 4.1% in the fiscal year 2020-2021. That's the fastest rate of growth for 15 years and follows a decade when public sector spending has been very tight in the UK. That should be stimulative for growth, should be stimulative for inflation. So there's, as I say, there is no excuse for them to plead ignorance and say we need to wait a couple more months. What we will get on the 11th of March, which is piquing a lot of interest in investors, is some details on where that money will be spent, some of the big long-term capital investment projects, the levelling up of growth around the UK. We'll start to get a bit of meat on the bones.
By the way, the UK spends money bailing out private companies, even this conservative government, which I think is interesting. I mean, a company like Flybe, which has shareholders like Virgin and Delta, gets bailed out when it needs the money. Is this conservative government, you think, different in terms of its approach to, capitalism than previous conservative governments have been?
Yes, but this was a political decision rather than an economic decision. This was, I mentioned previously in my last answer, the fact that the UK government is going on an exercise to try and level up spending and economic support for regions of the UK that have been deficient in terms of growth and output and investment. Flybe happens to be an airline that services a large number of those communities, and therefore politically it would have been very difficult for the government to sit by and see that airline fail. Does it tell us an awful lot about the more activist, more, dare I say, state aid strategy of the UK government post-Brexit? I'm not sure it tells us an awful lot more beyond what we already know, which is they will be more strategic in terms of their use of the public sector balance sheet. But I don't think we will get a real move towards systematic support for private sector industries as we've seen maybe 30, 40 years ago in the UK.
Really interesting to see the rivals in the sector taking action in EU fora because of this on state aid rules. I mean, it's quite fascinating, isn't it? We'll see how that plays out. Simon, as Matt said, the big story overnight, of course, is the signing of the Phase 1 trade deal. Yes. That's been done. At the same time, some big issues still remain with Phase 2. It does nothing to address Chinese-backed hacking of American companies or require China to change its state subsidies regime. And I suppose Phase 2 gets difficult because it really will start to go to the heart of the way that the Chinese economy operates. It's the structural stuff rather than the more cyclical stuff which has been dealt with maybe in Phase 1.
Yes, and China economically are an increasingly noisy neighbour to the US, and will be so based on their economic population trajectories. Their desire, the Made in China 2025 plan, will set out a movement up the value curve. It sounds a bit jargonistic, but effectively moving Chinese industry to start competing the more higher value, high quality manufacturing and services based economy, and that will start to nip increasingly at the heels of some of the industrial champions in the US. So phase 2 will not be easy, and those issues are far harder with some of the intangible issues. Tangible issues like tariffs, dumping, very visible trade. It's much easier, both rhetorically for governments to sell why they're making progress, taking action, but also easier to address in terms of it's more measurable, it's more observable. I think the issues in phase 2 are far more intractable.
Are you concerned about the U.S. turning its sights on Europe in terms of the trade war?
It's the question economists are getting asked at the moment, at the start of the year. Invariably we get asked, what is your big risk factor that none of us are talking about, but we should be worried about in 2020? And I do think a pivot in the focus of the US Trade Representative towards Europe is one of those risks, and specifically the auto sector, which you've been talking about this morning, given the data out of Germany. This is a big year for the mass rollout of electric vehicles, replacing the internal combustion engine. I think strategically using tariffs and non-tariff barriers to allow your country to get a foothold in this market would be a compelling case for actually not just the US, a number of countries to use protectionist barriers to do so.
Thanks very much. Really good to see you this morning, Simon. Simon French, Chief Economist at Panmure Gordon, joining us on TV and now here on Bloomberg Radio.
Let's get it over to Leanne Gerrans now for your more global news headlines. Leanne?
Good morning, Matt. The German government is paying RWE around 2.6 billion euros to exit coal. This as Chancellor Angela Merkel secures a deal to begin phasing out the dirty fossil fuel. RWE is Europe's biggest carbon dioxide emitter. It previously announced it wanted to become carbon neutral by 2040. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin has replaced his long-serving Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev with a little-known head of the tax service. Bloomberg's Henry Mayer says he has also called for sweeping constitutional changes,
fueling speculation that the Russian leader is moving to extend his grip on power beyond the end of his term in 2024. The constitution now requires Putin to step down as president then, but he could take on another post to ensure his continued influence. In Moscow, Henry Mayer, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
In the US, the House has sent 2 articles of impeachment to the Senate. It's the first step to begin President Trump's trial that is all but certain to end in acquittal. A supermajority of senators would be needed to convict the president. Chief Justice John Roberts will preside over the trial with the Senate as the jury. The trial will begin next Tuesday. And Hong Kong is behind on its taxes. Hundreds of thousands of residents are still waiting in January for their salaries tax bills, which normally would have started landing in mailboxes in July. Bloomberg's Eric Lamb reports.
Instead, the holdup is due to a legislative backlog linked to the ongoing protests that have rocked Hong Kong for the last 7 months. Only about 1/3 of tax assessments for individuals have been made. The government is further ahead when it comes to corporate taxes, having assessed 77% of profits tax returns. Hong Kong is expected to face its first budget deficit since the early 2000s, and delays in receiving tax payments could make the existing shortfall worse. In Hong Kong, Eric Lamb, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Anna.
Thanks very much for that, Leanne. Now with your morning sports news, here's George Alderman.
Manchester United progressed to the 4th round of the FA Cup with a 1-0 win over Wolves in their replay at Old Trafford last night. But the victory came at a cost, with Marcus Rashford going off injured shortly after coming on as a second-half substitute. Wolves were denied a goal by VAR. Their first-half effort was ruled out for a handball in the build-up. Boss Nuno Espirito Santo doesn't seem too impressed with the technology.
I didn't see the images yet, but that's VAR. Even us are afraid to celebrate. We don't celebrate no more. What's going on? Then Old Trafford celebrates an own goal. So it's VAR. Something is wrong.
United will play either Watford or Tranmere next. Cardiff will meet Reading after winning a thriller with Carlisle 4-3. And England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland will all discover their opponents when the draw for the 2021 Rugby League World Cup is made at Buckingham Palace this lunchtime. Prince Harry will conduct the draw.
Oh, let's get the U.S. sports with Pete Fox.
From the night on the NBA scoreboard in Boston at TD Garden, the Celtics' two-game winning streak comes to an end, falling to the Pistons 116-103. Gordon Hayward with 25. Kemba Walker posted 19 in the loss. Philadelphia at Wells Fargo, the Sixers get past the Nets 117-106, led by Tobias Harris's 34. Spencer Dinwiddie with 26 as the Nets have dropped back-to-back games. And the Wizards stumble in Chicago 115-106. I'm Pete Fox. That's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
All right, Pete, thanks very much. Now, sustainability has become a big deal for investors like BlackRock. But according to opinion columnist Chris Bryant, corporate pay practices need to catch up. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the Atlanta Braves, this meant bringing a $1 billion stadium project to life through a public-private partnership, creating the Battery, a mixed-use development that turned an underdeveloped area into a thriving community.
Always on the cutting edge of community development, Cohn Resnick advises industry participants on tax credits, affordable housing, opportunity zones, and more, helping communities reach their full potential. Explore more at cohnresnick.com/MLB. Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative. And that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Briggs.
A new year, new tech trends, and Deloitte has released their look at what's going to define the sector in the future. They see technology being the #1 differentiator that includes ethical technology and trust, as well as emotional AI. To tell us more is the author of the report and Deloitte Consulting CTO, Bill Briggs. Bill, loved the talk trends for 2020. The first one really stood out to me, highlighting digital twins. How do you see sort of bridging the gap between both the physical and the digital aspects of technology?
Yeah, Taylor, thanks for having me. And you hit on it, the fact that we're bringing them together. And a lot of times people think of technology trends and think it's got to be product-facing, market-facing, customer-facing. And what I love is that one puts front and center the importance of the back office. How do we think about applying emerging technology into things like the supply chain, and then in broader industries beyond just industrial manufacturing, where digital twins have had a great run over the last 10 years or so. It's being applied to different industries now.
Where do you see the future industries? What industries?
Yeah, well, take life sciences and healthcare. We're applying it into complete health systems. How do we think about hospital networks, how they run? How do we think about physical health in itself and broad treatment, which is not traditionally where we thought digital twins would apply.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London. I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So European stocks are edging higher, up by almost 0.3% at the moment. We've been pretty much range bound this year, despite almost every market in Western Europe being up for the year. In terms of the individual stocks that are focusing in on this morning, Pearson slumping more than 10% right now, the worst performing stock on the US stock 600 after the education publisher forecasts another drop in demand over in the US. It's a key higher education business over there. Also, in terms of US futures, they gained just slightly. The S&P 500 yesterday finished at another record high, of course, after the US and China signed the Phase 1 trade deal. But markets looking really for fresh catalysts after that. What will it be? Earnings, of course. Perhaps we're into earnings season, certainly in the US, with the big banks reporting. As for the bond markets, Turkey and South Africa both set interest rates today. US benchmark yields trade at 1.78% right now, negative 21 basis points, down a basis point for German bond yields. Talking a lot about the deluge of new debt in Europe. Big demand for government notes from Italy, Spain and others. Also in terms of the FX space, watching the ruble right now dropping 0.25% after Vladimir Putin announces a surprise shake-up, looking to keep power potentially after 2024, including a new prime minister. The dollar this morning holding on, slightly declining. Had been holding on to some gains, but actually down at the moment. The pound gains 0.1% at 1.3059. The euro trades at 1.1156. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Bloomberg's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. In the Philippines, police are vacating towns and cities near the erupting volcano. The intensity is weaker today, but the second highest level of alert is still in effect. A hazardous explosive eruption is possible within hours or days. 2 people have died and tens of thousands forced to flee. The EU and UK will have 8 months to hammer out a trade deal after Brexit. That's according to the European Commission chief Ursula von der Leyen. Speaking in Dublin yesterday, she said adding any extension to that time frame would be the UK's choice. And today's the deadline for people to register to vote in the Labour leadership elections as registered supporters of the party. They have until 5 o'clock this afternoon. Voting begins on the 21st of February with the result announced in April. Keir Starmer, Rebecca Long-Brady, Lisa Nandy, Jess Phillips and Emily Thornberry are all hoping to succeed Jeremy Corbyn. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garens. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's just gone 9:20 in the city of London. That means it's time to check in with our Bloomberg Opinion columnist. We're joined by Chris Bryant, who's making the case for ESG issues to drive executive compensation plans. So, Chris, this has become definitely a huge issue for especially consumer-facing investment firms, right? But you're saying it needs to be assured in the most important ways, which is to be shoehorned into contracts for CEOs.
Right, Matt. So, at the end of the day, executive compensation plans are designed to essentially encourage executives to do what the company wants them to do. And historically, that has been very much about driving profit, cash flow, and the share price. But last year, we had a bit of a change of heart from the Business Roundtable. That's essentially, the major U.S. companies who all signed up to this document. It essentially says the purpose of business isn't just about creating value for shareholders, but rather respecting and trying to benefit all stakeholders, i.e. customers, employees,
socialists,
and so forth. Well, you might say, "Oh, that sounds very socialist."
I was being sarcastic,
but I expect there'll be some doubters out there who do think essentially at the end of the day, all that matters is the bottom line, and executives should try and grow that. But I really
then the invisible hand steps in, Chris.
Well, I think we're at a key moment here. We've got the Davos Forum starting next week, where a lot of executives are gathering. We had, BlackRock coming out this week and saying climate change is now going to be at the center of everything we do. And if that's the case, then really, you've got these forces in play now that I think essentially we do need to think about about what we are incentivizing executives to do. And clearly that could be cutting emissions, but that could also be other things. I mean, look, the Boeing crisis, I think in particular, underscored how a company so focused on growing its share price really lost track of other more important things.
It's really interesting. It feels as if the ESG story, just anecdotally, the ESG side of achievement for the corporate world seems to have taken on new momentum into 2020. We've talked about it so much already, just 16, 17 days into the year, and it's interesting to see how that's. I mean, in Davos they've been talking about this for years, and it often felt like lip service, but now maybe it finally aligns with what's really going on in corporate boardrooms. But where are these? What are the kind of incentives that we need to put in place then here, Chris? What kind of changes or caveats would you like to see in remuneration statements for CEOs?
I mean, Anna, the first thing to say is that these things already exist. So particularly in the mining industry, also in oil industry, it's very common for executive pay to be tied to, for example, cutting number of fatal accidents. It's incredibly important for mining companies to maintain a license to operate, i.e. to be able to make profits in the first place. They need to make sure that they have a license. They need to cut accidents. But these sort of things can move on from there. And you've seen recently some major oil companies, also Siemens in Germany, for example, targeting cutting emissions. And clearly, that's going to be hugely important for the corporate sector over the coming years. Companies devote, hundreds of pages in sustainability reports to all the progress they're making on these measures. And yet very few of them actually then include emissions and sustainability issues in corporate pay packages. But the thing is, if you've got the investor world sort of demanding that companies do this, then why not incentivize executives to do it too?
Is there an exemplar? Is there a company that stands out as you think doing it the right way?
Well, for example, we got the Dutch company Royal DSM. It's a sort of materials company, life sciences. 50% of their long-term incentives are energy efficiency and greenhouse gas emissions related. As I've mentioned already, you've got Shell and BP who now put emissions at the heart of their executive compensation plans too. It's not going to satisfy everyone, but I do think that this is the way that the compensation needs to be headed.
Okay, yeah, even in sectors where the product, the bulk of product, is maybe not at the top of everybody's ESG compliant shopping list. But anyway, Chris, thank you very much. Chris Bryan joining us there to talk about ESG and executive pay. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. The Red Sox and manager Alex Cora have parted ways in a sign-stealing scandal. It comes just a day after the Houston Astros were sanctioned by Major League Baseball, accused of a sign-stealing scheme. Cora was a coach for the Astros during the alleged incident and was named in a report by the league. The WNBA is making a big bet on the league's players. The WNBA and its players' union have agreed in principle to a new collective bargaining agreement that would nearly double the maximum salary. It would also provide paid maternity leave. Under Armour will launch a new shoe for NBA star Joel Embiid in the fall of 2020. The UA Embiid 1 will be the first signature shoe for the Philadelphia 76ers star, though the two have partnered since 2018. The U.S. Postal Service will dedicate a stamp honoring golfer Arnold Palmer. Palmer died in 2016 at age 87. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Michael Barr.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Inovalon is a leading provider of cloud-based platforms empowering data-driven healthcare. Leveraging deep connectivity, the data of billions of medical events, and advanced analytics, Inovalon empowers the achievement of improved clinical outcomes and financial performance for thousands of health insurance companies, hospitals, doctors, pharmacies, and pharmaceutical companies, and the millions of patients they serve every day. Inovalon. Data has a story to tell. We give it a voice. Learn more at
Fly with Cathay Pacific and arrive ready to make the most of the mesmerizing metropolis of Tokyo. Book now at cathaypacific.com. Cathay Pacific. Move beyond.
3 is a magic number.
300 schemes to help bugs and bees, supporting environmental needs. 8,000 grants for local sports, and performing arts get our support. 7 millionaires every week, the nation's on a winning streak. 30 million pounds to good causes every week. Who'd have thought it? These are magic numbers.
Your numbers make amazing happen. The National Lottery.
Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Along the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
Hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move, hit a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
NFL Conference Championship Weekend is live on TuneIn, starting Sunday at 3:05 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss the Tennessee Titans and the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship.
Gets to the goal line, in for the touchdown!
Then, starting at 6:40 p.m. Eastern, hear the Green Bay Packers and San Francisco 49ers clash for the NFC crown.
Shotgun snap, hand off to Jones, knifes it over the left guard, touchdown!
At home or on the go, don't miss a second of playoff action with TuneIn Premium. Search Premium to upgrade. You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Hand off Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the German capital of Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Anna Edwards. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. It is 9:30 here in London, 10:30 if you're in Paris or Berlin with Matt Miller. And European equity markets bouncing a little this morning in the aftermath of the signing of the Phase 1 trade deal then, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. We got not only the signing the Phase 1 trade deal, but also really good news for the German automotive sector. However, it doesn't seem to be at least directly either one of those things that's lifting markets. We see gains in oil prices for one. Brent crude rising 1% or 60 cents a barrel to 64.60. And that is helping to push up oil producer shares. They are lifting indexes across Europe. We see in terms of other commodities, gold unchanged at 15.55.56 a troy ounce. And then in terms of rates, we see the U.S. 10-year yield at 1.7847%. Investors are buying the dollar against the yen, but you can still get almost 110 yen for your dollar. It's 109.98 right now. And the pound is trading at 130.56. We see the FTSE actually down about 0.2% in London, but the CAC is gaining 0.2% in Paris, and all other European indexes, save the Swiss market, are up. If you're preparing for the U.S. Open, we do see gains in U.S. futures as well. Right now, about 0.25% on Dow and S&P mini contracts, NASDAQ mini contracts up 0.33%. Strong earnings from the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, really helping to boost tech sector expectations ahead of the U.S. trade.
Matt, let's talk about one of our other big stories today, a little further from the markets, although there has been some market reaction, but geopolitically really very interesting. President Vladimir Putin has replaced his long-serving prime minister. He's also calling for sweeping changes to the country's constitution. The moves fuel speculation. The Russian leader is moving to extend his grip on power. Currently, his presidential term ends in 2024, but he could take on another post to ensure his continued influence. Joining us now from Moscow is our Bloomberg reporter, Jake Rudnitsky. Jake, good morning to you. So why is Putin doing this now?
Well, as you said, his final term comes up in 2024, and Putin needs to make sure that he remains to be the main political force in Russia for as long as he wants. He's been in power for 20 years, and now he's clearly unhappy with the way that the economy has been developing in recent years. This change will hopefully help him, spur development and get people back on his side as his popularity has been falling.
It's possible to reshape the Russian constitution so that different positions, have more or less power, right? I mean, being the president isn't necessarily a requisite to leading the country. You could lead the country as prime minister if you juggled things around.
Right. Well, that's what Putin did the last time around when he faced term limits. He switched with Medvedev. So Medvedev became president. Putin was prime minister for 4 years. It's not clear if that's going to be the same trick he wants to pull again coming forward. But what these constitutional changes will do is they will give the parliament more power, the prime minister more power, and then it also elevates something called the State Council, which has always been this advisory board that hasn't really had much real authority. It's going to give them a constitutional role. Now, what exactly these roles are going to be is not clear yet, but some people are theorizing that what Putin will do is he will lead this supervisory council, and that State Council will then let him retain a measure of power, and also whoever the incoming president will have a little less power than Putin does currently.
And what is the timetable for all of this? I mean, Putin has not said that this is what he wants to do yet, but this is the expectation that is building.
Everything's happening very quickly. Putin yesterday had his State of the Union address where he announced that these constitutional changes were going to be considered. And then some politicians have said that they expect that the constitutional changes will be put up to a vote by the general population at some point this year. Again, the kind of hard deadline that everybody is facing is 2024, which is when Putin's term ends. And so clearly before that happens, before 2024, they'll have to have some sort of system in place that will allow a smooth transition.
How much of this is about wanting to avoid, a lot of times leaders like to make sure that they don't have to face any trials after they're done. Is that an issue with Putin, or does he just want to continue to remain the leader of Russia?
Well, if you look at Russia, I mean, there aren't any real institutions in Russia except for Putin. So I think there's kind of a sense that Putin can't step away because everything is dependent on his personality and his relationships, and he controls everything here. Now, it would. Obviously, he would not leave power unless he had somebody he felt he could trust to not go after him and his assets or his whatever and not throw him in not throw him in jail or persecute him in any way. That I assume won't be very hard for Putin because, as I said, there's no viable opposition in Russia, and he's been very clear about just remaining the primary force in the political life here.
Just to be clear, Jake, when you say his assets, does anybody out there have a guess? Are there any estimates as to how much wealth Vladimir Putin has accumulated?
I mean, there are definitely estimates, but are there any reliable estimates? No. So you can hear numbers in the hundreds of billions of dollars, but I don't put, those tend to be people who are very critical of Putin and don't have a lot of, you look at the way that they reach those estimates, and they're not particularly based on fact.
Okay, thanks very much, Jake. Good to get your analysis. Bloomberg reporter Jake Rudnitsky joining us there from Moscow.
Let's get over to Leanne Gerrans now for more global news headlines. Leanne?
Good morning, Matt. The US and China have signed the preliminary stage of a trade deal, but many of the big issues in the relationship were left for the next phase. The deal commits China to cracking down on technology theft. It also outlines a $200 billion spending spree to close the trade imbalance. The German government is paying RWE around 2.6 billion euros to exit coal. This as Chancellor Angela Merkel secures a deal to begin phasing out the dirty fossil fuel. RWE is Europe's biggest carbon dioxide emitter. It previously announced it wanted to become carbon neutral by 2040. In the Philippines, police are vacating towns and cities near the erupting volcano. Bloomberg's Andrea Colonzo says this comes as the intensity of the eruption has somewhat weakened.
Weak emissions were observed in the volcano for the past 24 hours, but the hazardous explosive eruption is still possible within hours to days, the Philippine Volcanology Agency said Thursday. Another evacuee has died of cardiac arrest, as more than 82,000 people were moved to safer ground. In Manila, Andrea Calonzo, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And a pneumonia outbreak reported in China less than 3 weeks ago has now widened. Japan has confirmed its first case of the SARS-like virus. Bloomberg's Jason Gale has the story.
The man in his 30s had a fever when he returned to Japan after spending time with an infected person in Wuhan, health authorities said Thursday. He was hospitalized with pneumonia on January 10 and discharged with a mild cough 5 days later. No infections among healthcare workers have been reported, and there is no clear evidence of sustained human-to-human transmission, the World Health Organization said. In Melbourne, Jason Gale, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
I'll pick it up, Leanne, and I'll hand it right over to Pete Fox for your U.S. sports. Pete?
From the night on the college hardwood, top 25 action, Georgetown upends number 25 Creighton 83-80, led by Omer Yurtseven's double-double, 20 points and 13 boards. From the NBA scoreboard, the Sixers continue their hot play at home, now 19-2 at Wells Fargo after a 117-106 win over the Nets, who got 26 from Spencer Dinwiddie in the loss. Tobias Harris leading all with 34. In Boston at TD Garden, the Celtics' two-game winning streak comes to an end after the Pistons come away with a 116-103 victory. Gordon Hayward leading the way for Boston in the loss with 25. Kemba Walker posting 19. I'm Pete Fox. That's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
Thanks very much for that, Pete. Coming up on Bloomberg at Daybreak Europe, we'll speak to Daniel Morris, Senior Investment Strategist at BNP Paribas Asset Management. We'll get his take on the Phase 1 trade deal, which he says raises risks of further US-China tensions. I guess it comes down to compliance and whether you can ensure compliance, and what are the implications if the rules of Phase 1 are not complied with, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. And the big question that we're asking on Bloomberg today is, will China be able to fulfill its purchase commitments? There are a lot of American farmers waiting to hear that, and maybe some European rivals that hope they don't. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
IBKR is the professional's gateway to the world's markets. IBKR offers commissions starting at $0 for U.S.-listed stocks and ETFs, enhanced price execution via IB Smart Routing, and access to our powerful trader workstation, web, mobile, and API trading platforms. In addition, our clients enjoy the lowest cost access to stocks, options, futures, Forex, fixed income, and more on over 125 markets in 31 countries. Learn more or open an IBKR integrated investment account at ibkr.com.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey!
Hello, I'm your captain for today's Virgin Atlantic flight. Please drop everything and pay close attention to the following announcement. The sail is now on. Our crew are ready to take your bags and stresses away. The cocktails are ready to serve, the movies are loaded, and we're all set for takeoff to the Caribbean. So, take your seat in our award-winning economy class. We're ready to go when you are.
The Virgin Atlantic sail. Fly amazing for less. For more details, visit virginatlantic.com.
Here at Tesco, we're celebrating over 100 years of great value with even more great prices that take you back. Like a 4-pack of Magnum Classic ice creams, now half price, from £3.20 to just £1.60, all this week at Tesco.
Selected larger stores subject to availability. Offer ends 27th of January.
Got big plans for 2020? Capture and share every highlight on a gorgeous iPhone 11 with an ultra-wide camera. In Tesco Mobile's big January sale, you can get the latest iPhone for £40.75 a month with double data. That's a mighty 20 gigs. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 26th of January. Was 10 gigs, now 20 gigs. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements with Tesco Mobile required. Subject to status. Phase policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Puts his head down, crashes in the snap is good. The hold is good. The kick is on its way. It is good!
Did you know all weekend long the NFL playoffs are on TuneIn?
In for the touchdown.
Search NFL to never miss a moment of the action.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, has Silicon Valley changed since all the revelations about the world's social media companies?
I think people are really reluctant to relinquish this narrative of being underdogs, of being innovators, of just trying to experiment and make the world better.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
The NBA is on TuneIn Premium. Each week, TuneIn picks an NBA game you just can't miss. LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and the Lakers are in Houston to take on James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and the Rockets.
LeBron turned the corner! Slam dunk LeBron!
Harden steps left. He shoots for three, and that goes in.
This Saturday, the Los Angeles Lakers are at the Houston Rockets. Tip-off is at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Search NBA to follow your favorite NBA team today.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So European equities this morning gaining 0.1%. Little impetus though, really, as the Xetra DAX is up by 0.1%. Also, the CAC up by 0.2. The FTSE 100 drops 0.2%. It's mainly around the earnings season that we have fresh information. Pearson slumping more than 10% at the moment, the worst performer on the US Stock 600 after the US business forecast for another drop in demand, essentially. The one bright spot for Europe, though, has been the car sales figures jumping to a record in December. How long-lived, though, will that be? In terms of US equity futures, looking ahead to the market open, we gain almost 0.3% on the S&P 500 after the US and China inked that phase one trade deal yesterday. As for the bond markets, we're looking to Turkey and South Africa in terms of interest rate decisions. Benchmark yields on US 10-year notes at 1.78%, pretty much flat. Negative 21 basis points for German yields, down a basis point. Gilt yields on the 10-year at spot 6.5. And in terms of the FX space, watching the ruble, one of our top stories on the Bloomberg terminal about the shake-up by Vladimir Putin, a new prime minister, potentially trying to stay in power beyond 2024. For Putin, that is. The ruble drops 0.25% at 61.59. And in the oil markets this morning, we're down 0.2% on WTI crude at 57.94 as the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is flat and gold dips 0.1%. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin has replaced his long-serving prime minister. He's also calling for sweeping changes to the country's constitution. The move fuels speculation the Russian leader is moving to extend his grip on power. Currently, his presidential term ends in 2024, but he could take on another post to ensure his continued influence. In the US, the House has sent 2 articles of impeachment to the Senate. It's a first step to begin President Trump's trial that's all but certain to end in acquittal. A supermajority of senators would be needed to convict the president. Chief Justice John Roberts will preside over the trial with the Senate as jury. The trial will begin next Tuesday. And Hong Kong and Rio de Janeiro have topped a list of the most expensive cities for wealthy spenders. High tax rates in Brazil and pricey fine dining in Hong Kong are largely to blame. That's according to Julius Baer's Global Wealth and Lifestyle Report 2020. And while Hong Kong may drop in future rankings after months of protests take their toll on the economy, other Asian cities are well represented in the ranking, including Shanghai, Tokyo, Singapore, Taipei, and Bangkok. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Leanne, thanks very much for that. Now let's get over to Washington, D.C., where Nathan Hager is standing by and preparing for Bloomberg Daybreak out of the U.S. Nathan, what have you got prepared?
Well, just a few blocks from here, Matt, the president and Vice Premier Liu He signed the Phase 1 trade deal. That's done. Now we're digging into the details of this 86-page agreement, and many of the experts we're hearing from say it may be a little bit too soon to declare winners and losers from the years-long U.S.-China trade war, with Phase 2 still potentially around the corner. We'll ask Patrick Armstrong of Plurimi Wealth where he sees markets going now with Phase 1, at least in the books. We do have one more earnings report to get through from the major Wall Street banks. We're going to preview Morgan Stanley's fourth quarter with Bloomberg's Sonali Basak. And as Leanne mentioned, the articles of impeachment are now in the Senate with new evidence coming in even before the trial begins next week. We'll look ahead to a president on trial with Bloomberg's Kathleen Hunter. Join me and Karen Moscow for all that coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak. Matt.
Sounds fantastic. Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow then coming up next if you're listening on Sirius XM. If you're tuned in on London DAB Digital in the city, you'll hear surveillance.
Right, let's return to our top story. We heard a bit about it there from Nathan Hager. Agricultural commodities are weaker again today, despite China pledging to buy almost $95 billion worth of U.S. commodities as part of the Phase 1 trade deal. The market's still looking for hard evidence, and if you ask our next guest, China's promise seems, well, maybe ambitious. Let's get his up-to-date thoughts. Daniel Morris, Senior Investment Strategist at BNP Paribas Asset Management. Good morning to you, Daniel. So do you think that what the Chinese have promised is ambitious, and is it going to be enforceable?
Well, to put it in context, it would be a doubling, more than a doubling of the amount of imports that China took from the U.S. prior to the start of the trade war. Of course, imports from the U.S. have fallen subsequently in the same way that U.S. imports of Chinese goods have fallen. So part of it would just be potentially making that back up. But don't forget, of course, the tariffs haven't come back down. So even that isn't obvious that they're going to be able to do it. So to try to put it a bit into context, if you imagine that every company's sales in the S&P 500, those sales to China doubled over the next 2 years, then yes, that would be fantastic. But you can imagine that might be a bit difficult logistically.
What do you see in terms of the future paradigm of trade? I mean, is it really going to change that China steals IP and uses that as a developing nation? Is it really going to change that China limits who can do business inside while it looks to sort of spread its tentacles? I don't mean that to be pejorative, but works in more countries outside of its borders. Is that all going to change now?
Well, it would seem unlikely, and I think that's what you get a sense of the skepticism in the market, that even if on the one hand we did kind of the easy things, it's relatively easy for China to promise to buy more agricultural goods. They need it in some to some degree anyway, and of course if they do purchase more from the U.S., that can just come at the expense of other countries, say Brazil. But any fundamental change in the way China operates, that doesn't seem to be in the cards. It's not something you would imagine they would very readily agree to. You wonder about the leverage ultimately that the U.S. has to try to enforce that, which is why we think even with this deal, and it's so to speak good news for the market because you don't have tariffs going up yet further. At the same time, it raises the risk that you're going to have disappointment around exactly those areas, that Trump administration is not going to feel that China is progressing in the way that the Trump administration would like. And then what is the reaction from the administration at that point? Do you have a snapback of the tariffs, and are we back to where we were a year ago?
So you raise an interesting point there about Brazil and about the rest of the world, because we spoke to Jörg Wuttke, who's from the EU Chamber of Commerce, Daniel, and he was talking about how this has changed the rules of the game, this bilateral arrangement to buy, from A to B. If the Chinese are buying US pork, seafood and soybeans, maybe they're buying less of all of those things from other countries. Are they... I mean, it seems like, good news. Well, news stories seem to would head to the WTO to die, perhaps, and maybe we'd hear no more about it. But is there some WTO angle to this, that perhaps what has been signed and what seems to have given the markets a little bit of relief, even if it's not enthusiasm, could it infringe on trade regulations?
Well, this is what, economists don't like about these type of bilateral trade deals, because really what it comes down to is trade diversion as opposed to increasing the aggregate amount of trade, which is where you get the benefits from trade. It's more trade should be better for everyone, but if you're just taking from Peter to pay Paul, as they say, it really doesn't help. So it's going to be potentially beneficial for some U.S. corporations, but it's going to be at the expense of European corporations and so on. And it does or should make you more skeptical about this idea that with the deal you're going to see a global rebound in trade. And if you don't see that, then you have a question about what kind of rebound you're going to see in global growth.
Are you concerned about the U.S. looking for bilateral trade deals next with Europe?
Well, absolutely. You got to imagine that from Trump's point of view, you've now had this deal signed. You expect to have the new NAFTA deal passed very soon. Don't forget we did have a deal with Japan that was agreed a bit ago. So from Trump's point of view, this has been a wonderfully successful strategy, and let's do more of it. Certainly plenty of areas of contention with Europe. It could be taxes on U.S. tech companies. Of course, you have Airbus and Boeing. That's been a long-running dispute. German autos, we could go on, and any of those Trump could say, or in his mind feel that using using tariffs has been effective, so let's use it again. In addition, of course, to any of the political considerations ahead of the election, him trying to balance whatever the negative implications might be for the stock market versus the political benefit if he seemed to be standing up for America's interests.
Geopolitically, it's interesting. I was reading a thought piece on Bloomberg Opinion by Tyler Cowan, who's written something a little bit more pro-Trump in terms of the what has been achieved here on trade. And he widens this and says this is not just about what's been achieved in a phase one trade deal or not achieved. He talks about how the US has established its seriousness as a counterweight to China, something that maybe was lacking previously when China made various territorial encroachments in the 2010s. Not to get too much into the geopolitics of it, but just in terms of the backdrop to your investment strategy, Daniel, does this change the power balance at all, what we're seeing here?
Well, certainly there's a lot of angles to the dispute and the tension between the U.S. and China, national security being one, in addition to tariffs and trade and so on. And a lot of the issues that the Trump administration has been trying to address over the last 2 years are issues that have been concerns in Europe and Australia and Japan for quite a long time. So, again, to give credit where credit's due, probably more, at least, has been attempted to be done around this than you've seen previously. It's just whether or not we've really seen much that's accomplished. Because ultimately, if you do want to benefit global economy and markets, you want to see actually lower tariffs in the end, which clearly we're not there yet, and you do want to see increased market access and respect for intellectual property rights. So potentially we're on the path, but I see a lot of deviations along the way.
Daniel, thanks very much. Thanks for your time. Daniel Morris, Senior Investment Strategist at BNP Paribas Asset Management.
And that does it for Anna and myself on Daybreak Europe this morning. If you're listening on Sirius XM in New York, good morning to you. Daybreak out of Washington, D.C. and New York. Wall Street, American Wall Street is up next. If you're listening on London DAB digital radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance. This is Bloomberg.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. Banking jobs, building jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, Waterloo jobs, Canary Wharf jobs. New year, new you, new job, jobs. First jobs, flexible jobs, pay off the Christmas debt jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, small jobs, big jobs, work from home in your PJs jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
On a TUI tour, our English-speaking local guides will take you off the tourist trail. They won't just help you find the perfect souvenir, they'll show you how to make it. Choose from over 70 unforgettable tours worldwide. From tranquil temples in India to sunrise safaris in South Africa. On a TUI tour, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Book now and enjoy up to £200 off per booking. Booking T's and C's and minimum spend applies. Selected holidays only. At all protected.
Your Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, January 16th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Praise and criticism roll in on the freshly signed trade deal.
Today we take a momentous step.
It falls way below the expectations.
That is a big boon for Iowa farmers.
Details, analysis, winners and losers, and the Phase 1 agreement coming up.
The articles of impeachment are now in the hands of the Senate. Plus, an indicted associate of Rudy Giuliani accuses President Trump of lying about Ukraine. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Nets lost in Philadelphia. Seton Hall upset fifth-ranked Butler. St. John's lost at Providence.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York. Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 106.1 Boston. Bloomberg 960 San Francisco. Sirius XM 119. And around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak brought to you by SEI. Today's competitive marketplace requires asset managers to become more operationally adept. See how you can transform your business with SEI's global platform at SEIC.com/IMS.
And U.S. futures are gaining after another record close for stocks, 5:01 on Wall Street. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 8.5 points. Dow futures up 65. NASDAQ futures up 31. The DAX in Germany is little change, down about 0.1%. CAC in Paris also little change. And the FTSE 100 down 0.33%. Nikkei 225 in Japan was up less than 0.1%. And the Hang Seng in Hong Kong gained 0.4%. 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 1.78%. Yield on the 2-year 1.55%. NYMEX crude oil up 0.25% or 13 cents at $57.93 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.1%, up $1.60 to $15.55.60 an ounce. The euro 1.1153 against the dollar. The yen is at 110. Nathan.
Well, Karen, the Phase 1 trade deal is in the books.
Today we take a momentous step, one that has never been taken before with China.
The much-anticipated signing did little to boost stocks, though the Dow and the S&P 500 nudged higher to close at records. For one veteran trade negotiator, details of the agreement fall short. Wendy Cutler is Managing Director of the Asia Society and former Deputy U.S. Trade Representative.
It falls way below the expectations they set out at the beginning of this negotiation when they were going to address all the issues that were keeping U.S. companies out of the Chinese market and do it within 90 days. This negotiation proved a lot tougher than they thought.
For now, analysts appear hesitant to declare a winner in the deal, saying the toughest negotiations are yet to come.
For now, though, American farmers and finance firms can declare a win. We spoke with Republican Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa.
This Phase 1 China deal focuses heavily on the purchase of agricultural goods by China. So number one, that is a big boon for Iowa farmers. But then you talk about enforcement mechanisms and you get into intellectual property theft, things of that nature. We will continue to build on that as we move into Phase 2.
Commodities markets, though, might have expected more. Prices fell for most raw materials that are part of the agreement, including soybeans, cotton, and corn.
The deal will also help investment banks and credit card companies grab a bigger slice of China's finance industry. Here with details is Bloomberg's Lucille Liu in Beijing.
There is a bring forward of the timeline for opening, and there have been some enforceable deadlines set. So, for example, we've seen for securities firms, they brought forward the timeline for full foreign ownership from December 1st to April 1st. And they've also said that they would review applications from electronic payment services providers in less than 90 days.
Credit card stocks are some of the biggest gainers on the deal. MasterCard rose 1.1%, while Visa finished the day up 1.9%.
Business leaders in Europe, however, are not thrilled with the agreement. We spoke with Jörg Wuttke, president of the EU Chamber of Commerce in China.
It means that for the next 2 years, $200 billion will be basically traded between two nations without this kind of competition. And this is what we actually don't like about this.
And the EU Chamber of Commerce president said the deal rewrites globalization, and he questions whether it conforms to World Trade Organization rules.
And what's notably absent from the Phase 1 agreement is any relief for Huawei Technologies. The Chinese company's been the subject of U.S. sanctions and faces the prospect of even more restrictions. Still, Huawei's Director of Congressional Affairs, Donald Morrissey, tells us he's optimistic for relief in future agreements.
The trade deals between the two countries, Huawei has no input there. However, like any global company, we look for trade stability as well as open markets. And we've always preached that, and we hope that's the result down the road as we get to Phase 2 or Phase 3.
Reports suggest the Trump administration is considering plans to further limit the ability of U.S. companies to supply Huawei, even as Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says he doesn't view Huawei as a chess piece in negotiations with China.
Market reaction to the trade deal was fairly muted in Asia overnight. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us now from Singapore with details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Karen. Stocks in China were among the weakest in the region. The CSI 300 down 0.4% on the close, while both the on and offshore yuan moved back towards 6-month highs against the dollar following the signing of the deal. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 closed slightly higher at 23,933 points in Tokyo. Healthcare stocks among the best performers as Japan's first confirmed case of the new coronavirus lifted mask makers, along with companies which make antibacterial equipment. And in Taipei, the TAIEX closed down by 0.2%. TSMC shares falling on reports the US is pressing the chip maker to produce on American soil, and despite beating expectations with its fourth quarter numbers. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Saleh, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Juliet, thanks. Back here in the U.S., we have more bank earnings on the docket. Morgan Stanley publishes results this morning after mixed reports from Bank of America and Goldman Sachs. Here with a preview is Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky.
Analysts are forecasting a 40% year-over-year increase in earnings per share, even as revenue is seen falling by 14%. Trading may jump from a tough 2018 fourth quarter, according to Bloomberg Intelligence, while advisory could temper fee gains given the strong year-over-year comparison. The bank may provide detail concerning staff reductions, reported by Bloomberg News at about 1,500, with a potential related charge of up to $200 million. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Larry, thank you. S&P futures are up 8.5 points this morning. Dow futures up 66 and NASDAQ futures up 30. 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 1.78%. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It is 5:07 on Wall Street. Now let's check in with Michael Barr for what else is going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Now that the Senate has received the articles of impeachment against President Trump, plans have been put into motion leading to opening arguments next Tuesday. Bloomberg's Bob Moon reports.
It will be a day of high drama, the agenda laid out by Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
We've officially invited the House managers to come to the Senate at noon to exhibit their articles of impeachment.
One of those House members, Adam Schiff, says he feels the weight of history.
We feel that we are carrying out the will of the framers of our Constitution, and that's a pretty serious load to carry.
Chief Justice John Roberts will make his way across the street from the Supreme Court and be sworn in by Senator Chuck Grassley.
Then the Chief Justice will swear in all of us senators.
And for the first time, the President will become part of the process, receiving a formal summons to send his defense counsel. Bob Moon, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Lev Parnas, an indicted associate of Rudy Giuliani, accused President Trump of lying for saying that he did not know what Parnas and Giuliani were doing in Ukraine. In an interview with MSNBC, Parnas said, "I wouldn't do anything without the consent of Rudy Giuliani or the president." New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy says the state's economy under the last administration didn't grow and wasn't fair. Murphy talked about New Jersey's business environment with Bloomberg's Carol Masser.
We've got a minimum wage that's finally getting toward $15, equal work for equal pay for equal work, earned sick leave, funding women's health and Planned Parenthood, criminal justice reform, lots of things there.
Murphy also signed legislation expanding the definition of terrorism under state law in response to last month's fatal attack on a kosher market in Jersey City. Virginia's governor says state law enforcement agencies have discovered credible and serious threats of violence planned for a pro-gun rally at the Capitol in Richmond this Monday. Governor Ralph Northam issued a state of emergency to go into effect Friday night until Tuesday morning, banning all weapons, including firearms, from Capitol grounds.
This intelligence comes from mainstream channels, both offline and online, such as alternative dark web channels used by violent groups and white nationalists from outside Virginia.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Nathan, for the first time this week, a World Series winning manager was not fired. But with A.J. Hinch out in Houston, Alex Cora in Boston, the focus has now turned to new Mets manager Carlos Beltran. He not only played for the Astros in 2017 when they were stealing signs illegally, the MLB report says Beltran was involved in hatching the scheme, though baseball decided not to discipline him. If he keeps the Mets job, Beltran certain to be asked about all this when spring training begins next month. Meanwhile, here's Red Sox owner John Henry on the departure of Cora.
It's not what we would like to be doing at this point, but we were all surprised to read this report on Monday, but this is, I don't know if you would call it a logical conclusion, but this is where we are as a result of that.
Red Sox now looking for a new manager. Nets lost in Philadelphia 117-106. Sixers finished the game on a 13-2 run. They got 34 points from Tobias Harris. The Nets have lost 9 of 11. St. John's fell to 1-4 in the Big East, a 63-58 loss at Providence. Seton Hall 5-0 atop the Big East. What a win for the Pirates, down 10 at the half. They outscored Butler 48-30 from there. They beat the team ranked 5th in the country, 78-70. Miles Powell, as usual, led the Hall, 29 points. Rutgers still unbeaten at home, 59-50 over Indiana. Fordham lost by 2 in overtime at Duquesne. Northeast Conference Battle of Brooklyn, LIU topped St. Francis. It's the NFL's 100th season, so the Hall of Fame doing things differently this year. A larger class announced earlier than usual. Named for induction, the late George Young, the former Giants GM, and Winston Hill, tackle on the Jets' Super Bowl winning team. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
And John, looks like there's one thing LSU quarterback Joe Burrow won't be able to keep. The national champion, Heisman Trophy winner, and likely number 1 NFL draft pick will not be keeping the football used in the final play of the championship game. One memorabilia expert says the ball could command at least $100,000 at auction, but an LSU spokesman says it belongs to the university and it will probably stay in the trophy case at LSU's football operations facility. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
On a TUI tour, our English-speaking local guides will take you off the tourist trail. They won't just help you find the perfect souvenir, they'll show you how to make it. Choose from over 70 unforgettable tours worldwide. From tranquil temples in India to sunrise safaris in South Africa. On a TUI tour, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Book now and enjoy up to £200 off per booking. Booking T's and C's and minimum spend applies. Selected holidays only. At all protected.
New year calling for a new kitchen? Get to B&Q for up to 5 years interest-free credit with no deposit on our new kitchen range. Hurry, offer ends 2nd of February. You can do it when you B&Q it. Minimum spend £8,500 for 5 years interest-free credit. Credit subject to status. B&Q PLC is a credit broker and works exclusively with the Targi Capital UK PLC, both authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority.
Got big plans for 2020? Capture and share every highlight on a gorgeous iPhone 11 with an ultra-wide camera. In Tesco Mobile's big January sale, you can get the latest iPhone for £40.75 a month with double data. That's a mighty 20 gigs. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 26th of January. Was 10 gigs, now 20 gigs. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements with Tesco Mobile required. Subject to status. Phase policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in. Touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Briggs.
A new year, new tech trends, and Deloitte has released their look at what's going to define the sector in the future. They see technology being the #1 differentiator that includes ethical technology and trust, as well as emotional AI. To tell us more is the author of the report and Deloitte Consulting CTO, Bill Briggs. Bill, love to talk trends for 2020. The first one really stood out to me, highlighting digital twins. How do you see sort of bridging the gap between both the physical and the digital aspects of technology?
Yeah, Taylor, thanks for having me. And you hit on it, the fact that we're bringing them together. And a lot of times people think of technology trends and think it's got to be product-facing, market-facing, customer-facing. And what I love is that one puts front and center the importance of the back office. How do we think about applying emerging technology into things like the supply chain, and then in broader industries beyond just industrial manufacturing, where digital twins have had a great run over the last 10 years or so. It's being applied to different industries now.
Where do you see the future industries? What industries?
Yeah, well, take life sciences and healthcare. We're applying it into complete health systems. How do we think about hospital networks, how they run? How do we think about physical health in itself and broad treatment, which is not traditionally where we thought digital twins would apply.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures are rising this morning. European shares are fluctuating in the wake of the signing of the U.S.-China trade deal, an event that helped drive global stocks to record highs. Bonds are drifting. The dollar is steady. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 9 points. Dow futures up 69. NASDAQ futures up 32. The DAX in Germany is down about 0.2%. 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 1.78%. The yield on the 2-year 1.55%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.33% or 21 cents at 58.02 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.1%, up $1.40 to 15.5540 an ounce. The euro 1.1156 against the dollar, British pound 1.3054, and the yen 109.99. And a busy day ahead for economic data. We get the import price index out at 8:30 Wall Street time, along with a look at retail sales and the weekly report on initial jobless claims. The Bloomberg Consumer Comfort Index is out at 9:45, and business inventories out at 10. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Lev Parnas, an indicted associate of Rudy Giuliani, accused President Donald Trump of lying for saying that he didn't know what Parnas and Giuliani were doing in Ukraine. In an interview with MSNBC's Rachel Maddow yesterday, Parnas said President Trump knew exactly what was going on. Parnas says he was instructed by Giuliani to tell Ukrainian officials that all U.S. aid to Ukraine would be withheld if Ukraine didn't announce an investigation into the Bidens. His comments came on the same day that Democratic members of the U.S. House walked across the Capitol to deliver the 2 impeachment articles against Trump to the Republican-controlled Senate. Today, Supreme Court Justice Chief John Roberts will swear in all 100 senators as jurors. In the NBA, the Nets, Celtics, and Wizards all lost. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's just before 5:20 on Wall Street. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak. On this morning after the signing of the Phase 1 trade agreement, we're joined live by Patrick Armstrong, Chief Investment Officer at Plurimi Wealth. Good morning, Patrick. I trust you've had enough time to sift through the 86 pages of this agreement between the world's two biggest economies. Who do you see coming out as winners from this deal?
I think the global economy is basically a mild winner. Nothing shocked us with the deal. There's big commitments for what China is going to be purchasing from U.S., but those are intentions subject to demand. So I don't think there's any real game-changing announcement yesterday. We get a small clawback on some of the existing tariffs, but not as much as maybe we were hoping for a few months ago. So it's something that gets rid of an overhang, gets rid of some uncertainty, but it's not really going to be a massive boost to growth either.
But given the fact that there aren't firm commitments for China to or for these commitments to be enforced, I should say, does that pose a potential headwind for the market going forward?
Yeah, I think it probably poses a headwind because of Trump's reaction to that. So if we get a couple of quarters into this and you're not seeing significant progress on consumption by China of U.S.-produced goods and agricultural products, it does leave that open to a potential of new tariffs and getting back to where we were a year ago, basically, where it looked like we had a deal and then it quickly fell apart in the spring of 2019. You could see that sort of thing happening again quite quickly.
Now, when you talk about conditions potentially going back to where we were, thinking about the fact that, we've been through this trade spat between the U.S. and China for nearly 3 years now, I guess the fundamental question is, was all this back and forth, all these tit-for-tat tariffs worth it in the end?
Well, I don't know if it was. We did get a deal announced yesterday, and that may have been the objective of the Trump administration. You get the nice headlines, you call it a deal, but I don't really know if situations dramatically improved. We don't have any hard commitments. We do have intellectual property, not forced transfer of intellectual property, things like that. So that won't be a law from China anymore, but they can still influence companies and say, don't do any deals unless you do this. So it won't be an explicit law, but they can still control how these things happen in the background as well. So it's given us 6 months of respite, probably, where there's no new tariffs while we see how this plays out, but I don't think it solves much.
Do you think that's what explains at least the short-term gains we're seeing in equities this morning? I mean, we're poised for more records once again. What do you see fueling the continued bull market here?
100% sure it's liquidity being put into the market by central banks. So we've got zero and negative interest rates around the world. We've got the Fed increasing its balance sheet every day. The Bank of China, ECB, doing the same thing. So there's basically an economic expansion, not much earnings growth, but lots of liquidity. And we think those forces are likely to stay in place for most of the first half of this year anyway. So the path of least resistance is a rise for equities, not really being supported by the fundamentals of earnings, though, yet.
Now, you mentioned earnings. What's your take on what we've seen from the financials thus far? We're waiting results from Morgan Stanley, obviously. Do the results we've seen from the other banks pose a potential tailwind for the market?
I think the banks that are going to outperform, and you've seen it in the ones that have announced already, is the trading operations. Banks with good bond trading desks have outperformed expectations in Q4. And again, that's probably driven by the Fed, basically. If you're a bank, you know you can buy a bond and sell it back to the Fed, who's doing their overnight repo operations every day. So that's a bit of a profit tailwind for the banks. So overall, I think banks probably got a bit of earnings momentum, especially ones with bond trading desks have a significant portion of revenue.
Well, less than a minute left. What other sectors do you see outperforming as we head into these months of 2020?
So I like healthcare in the United States. It's a sector where you're getting real earnings growth of about 8 to 9%. It's trading at a discount to the market. And that's because of political risks. And the rhetoric is very strong from the potential Democratic candidates. We think actual policy won't be anywhere near as strong as the rhetoric by the time, if we even do get a Democratic president. So that's a sector that looks cheap with growth.
Always good to get your insights, Patrick. Thanks so much for being with us this morning. That's Patrick Armstrong, Chief Investment Officer at Plurimi Wealth. And looking at the markets this morning, at least in the U.S., they're pointing toward more records potentially on Wall Street. S&P futures higher by 8 points right now. Dow futures up 65. NASDAQ futures a gain of 31 points. European stock markets drifting to the downside. The stock 600 is down 0.1%. DAX in Germany down 0.2%. Back in the U.S., 10-year Treasury down 1/32. The yield 1.78%. 2-year 1.55, just shy of 1.56% yield. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Looks like a higher Wall Street open today with stocks at or near record highs after the signing of the Phase 1 U.S.-China trade deal. The Dow yesterday jumped 91 points. Good news from the housing market as the U.S. logged fewer foreclosures in 2019, hitting a 15-year low. The real estate number-crunching firm Adam Data Solutions says there were just over 493,000 foreclosure filings last year. That's down 21% from the year before and 83% from a peak of almost 3 million foreclosures back in 2010. Imagine jumping into a taxi, lifting off, and flying over gridlocked traffic below. Several companies are working on flying taxis, including Joby Aviation, and now it's getting a big backer as Toyota invests $394 million in that firm. And Alcoa's bid to stem a year-long profit slide is not getting much help from an aluminum market that's showing little promise of recovery. The manufacturer has just reported a wider-than-expected adjusted loss for the fourth quarter. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Welcome to Nuffield Health Battersea, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a wide range of equipment and classes, and our expert team will support you to get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
I spy with my little eye something beginning with B.
Bike.
Nope. Banana tree.
Oh, of course. We must have missed it. Although you might not be able to see it, your small actions can have a real impact with Shell. Drive carbon neutral by filling up and using Shell Go Plus today. Make the change. Drive carbon neutral. Shell. Go well. See goplus.shell.com/CO2 for details.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
I used to be a bit of a rubbish sleeper. I'd toss and turn all night. And somehow I could never find the comfy bit of the mattress. It was a proper nightmare. That's what brought me here. Testing mattresses in the Which Test Lab. We use a custom-made barrel rolling machine to simulate a decade's worth of use. And the mattresses that perform best are the only ones we recommend for your bedroom.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Fly with Cathay Pacific and arrive ready to make the most of the mesmerizing metropolis of Tokyo. Book now at cathaypacific.com. Cathay Pacific. Move beyond.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day,
You can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We are just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are higher after another record close for stocks. The U.S. and China's Phase 1 deal is in the books, putting the trade war on hold. Still, there's more work ahead. Wendy Cutler is managing director at the Asia Society and former deputy U.S. trade representative.
Looking ahead, not only will the two sides need to implement the deal and make sure that China's not violating the negotiation, but remember, this is a Phase 1 deal, and by definition, there's a Phase 2. And the Phase 2 negotiations are going to be difficult.
U.S. finance firms were one of the winners in the agreement, which moves up the timeline for investment banks and credit card companies to grab a bigger slice of China's finance industry. They can now form fully owned units as soon as April. Here with details is Bloomberg's Lucille Liu in Beijing.
JP Morgan has been very vocal about wanting full ownership, and we've had half a dozen fund managers, including BlackRock, say that they are looking to go for full ownership for mutual fund companies starting on April 1st.
And speaking of financials, they'll be in focus again today when Morgan Stanley, BlackRock, and Schwab report earnings. For Morgan Stanley, analysts predict earnings per share around $1 and fixed income trading revenue of $9.4 million.
Also on the agenda today, a key economic report. Economists predict retail sales increased 0.3% in December. Here with more is Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Bloomberg Economics is forecasting holiday sales posted the second weakest showing the past decade. Online sales probably gained, but stores and shopping malls probably suffered. Auto sales, meantime, were down based on industry data. Also on today's calendar, a variety of data, including jobless claims, import prices, and homebuilder confidence, which zoomed to a 20-year high in December. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Vinny, thank you. And turning to Europe now, car sales on the continent jumped 21% last month. There was an end-of-the-year buying frenzy caused by upcoming new emissions penalties. That, however, threatens to sap demand heading into 2020. Futures this morning are heading higher, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 9 points, Dow futures up 66, NASDAQ futures up 33. The DAX in Germany's down 0.2%. 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 1.78%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.55%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1/3% or 21 cents at 58.02 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.1%, up $1.40 to 15.5540 an ounce, and the euro 1.1160 against the dollar. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
Thank you, Karen. It's 5:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr has more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says the impeachment trial against President Trump will begin in earnest on Tuesday. Yesterday, the House sent 2 articles of impeachment against Trump to the Senate. McConnell told colleagues that the House managers will be invited today to formally read the articles into the record, and a few hours later,
the Chief Justice of the United States will arrive here in the Senate. He will be sworn in by the President Pro Tem, Senator Grassley. Then the Chief Justice will swear in all of us senators.
A close associate of President Trump's personal lawyers says he delivered an ultimatum in May to the incoming president of Ukraine that all American aid to the war-torn country would be withheld if an investigation into Joe Biden wasn't announced. Lev Parnas made the claims to Rachel Maddow on MSNBC.
What do you think is the main inaccuracy or the main lie that's being told that you feel like you can correct?
That the president didn't know what was going on. President Trump knew exactly what was going on. He was aware of all of my movements. I wouldn't do anything without the consent of Rudy Giuliani or the president.
Meanwhile, a House committee chairman said his panel will investigate what he says are profoundly alarming text messages from a Trump donor that have raised questions about the possible surveillance of former ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, before she was ousted by the Trump administration. Vladimir Putin's new choice for prime minister pledged to make changes in the cabinet just a day after the Russian leader surprised the political elite with a government shakeup. Bloomberg's Henry Mayer has more from Moscow.
President Vladimir Putin replaced his long-serving Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev with the little-known head of the tax service and called for sweeping constitutional changes, fueling speculation that the Russian leader is moving to extend his grip on power beyond the end of his term in 2024. The constitution now requires Putin to step down as president then, but he could take on another post to ensure his continued influence. In Moscow, Henry Mayer, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Federal government agencies say the last decade was by far the hottest ever measured on Earth, averaging 58.4 degrees. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Thank you, Michael. 5:35 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan Seton Hall began the season with high hopes, ranked 12th in the country. Bit of a slow start, 6-4 after a 20-point loss at Rutgers. But since then, the Pirates are 7-0, and last night they came from 10 down to upset 5th-ranked Butler on the road, 78-70. Miles Powell, 29 points. Butler came in 15-1. St. John's lost at Providence, 63-58. Rutgers beat Indiana, 59-50. Fordham lost by 2 in overtime at Duquesne. LIU topped St. Francis. Florida State beat Virginia. Last year's national champs have lost 3 in a row. First loss for Auburn, blown out at Alabama. That leaves San Diego State as the lone unbeaten. Also in the SEC, South Carolina upset Kentucky. The Nets lost at Philadelphia 117-106 as Tobias Harris scored 34. Spencer Dinwiddie led Brooklyn with 26. Kyrie Irving held the 14, shot just 6 of 21. First time playing back-to-back nights since returning from his injured shoulder.
I was trying to pace myself as best I could. Just in the first quarter, some of the shots I was making yesterday were a little short. In and outs a few. They were being very physical. Any team we play against, they're going to game plan pretty tough to be physical with me and kind of corral me in a pick and roll.
Upset in the NBA, Orlando beat the Lakers in L.A., ending the Lakers' 9-game win streak. Still no word from the Mets. Will they stand by new manager Carlos Beltran despite his involvement in the sign-stealing scandal in Houston? CeCe Sabathia thinks the Yankees got cheated and that the Astros should have had their 2017 championship vacated. Sabathia and the Yankees lost that ALCS to the Astros. CeCe was the Game 7 loser. They lost all 4 games played in Houston. Of course, that's where the sign-stealing was going on. But the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashauer. Nathan?
Thank you, John. It's 5:37 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now with the cover on the hidden dangers of the index fund takeover. Also in this week's issue, how wildfires in Australia are shining a light on the connection between fossil fuels and climate change. Eric Roston contributed to the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
It's very difficult to dispel what's going on in the ground there, and the incredible suffering. Communities have been uprooted and have uncertain, at least near-term futures.
You can read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go and listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly weekdays at 2 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio. 5:38 on Wall Street. That's time for the Tri-State Business Report with Bloomberg's Ed Corey. Good morning, Ed.
Hey, Nathan. New York City is reaping the benefits of a construction boom. The city set a value of $1.4 trillion for its more than 1 million properties for the fiscal year beginning in July. That's a $62 billion increase from the prior period. The value of new construction reached the highest level in the last 10 years, according to Department of Finance data. Almost no one buying a home in Greenwich is paying full price these days. 90% of all single-family deals in the fourth quarter were for less than what the seller was seeking, according to appraiser Miller Samuel and brokerage Douglas Elliman Real Estate. A millionaire's tax remains on the New Jersey governor's agenda. In Governor Phil Murphy's State of the State address this week, he said he won't give up a fight for the tax. It would raise the marginal rate for taxpayers with annual incomes over $1 million to 10.75%. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Nathan?
All right, Ed, thank you. It's 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WTVN in Columbus, I'm reporting home foreclosure activity declined significantly in 2019.
I'm Tom Busby, and on WBZ in Boston, I'll be reporting on Bose, the high-end speaker maker based in Framingham, Mass., closing all its U.S. stores.
I'm Roger Hearing. On Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London, we're reporting on EU warnings that the UK has only 8 months to negotiate a trade.
I'm Ed Corey on KFBK in Sacramento. I'm reporting Apple has tapped a specialist in drone and aviation law as a Washington lobbyist.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. Another Apple story we're watching, the company's main chip maker is projecting quarterly sales well above estimates. TSMC also posted fourth quarter earnings better than expected. Taiwan's largest company is investing in technology to make sure it maintains its market lead over Samsung and Intel. Alcoa's bid to stop a year-long profit slump is not getting much help from the aluminum market. Top U.S. producer reported a fourth quarter loss that was bigger than expected, its fourth straight quarterly decline. And the CEO of the company that owns Smith & Wesson is leaving. American Outdoor Brand says James Debney engaged in non-financial misconduct. It didn't elaborate. Futures moving higher this morning. This is Bloomberg.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich? No. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At TUI, we're spreading sunshine early by giving away hundreds of thousands of free kids' places. So you can holiday with the little ones for less. Book today and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. From splash parks to swimming lessons. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Direct debit on web bookings only. Free kids' places subject to limited availability. One free child place per 2 full paying adults. Booking T's and C's apply. At all protected.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
NFL Conference Championship Weekend is live on TuneIn, starting Sunday at 3:05 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss the Tennessee Titans and the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship.
Gets to the goal line, in for the touchdown!
Then, starting at 6:40 p.m. Eastern, hear the Green Bay Packers and San Francisco 49ers clash for the NFC crown.
Shotgun snap, hand off to Jones, knifes in over the left guard, touchdown!
At home or on the go, don't miss a second of playoff action with TuneIn Premium. Search Premium to upgrade.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
20 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
The U.S. House officially delivers articles of impeachment to the Senate, allowing President Trump's impeachment trial to begin.
The articles were delivered by House Clerk Cheryl Johnson.
A resolution appointing and authorizing managers for the impeachment trial of Donald John Trump, President of the United States.
An official presentation will follow tomorrow at noon in the Senate chamber. After that, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts, who will preside over the trial, will swear in all U.S. senators. They will serve as the jury.
Linda Kenyon on Capitol Hill. One day after signing a new trade deal with China, President Trump is expected to get more news on trade. The Senate today takes up the new North American Trade Pact. The House has already overwhelmingly approved the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. Stocks ended a wobbly day on Wall Street Wednesday. The Dow added 91 points. I'm John Trout.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow.
Is that good for American finance? What is happening with the headcount?
Right, where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures on the rise. European shares fluctuating in the wake of the signing of the U.S.-China trade deal, an event that helped to drive global stocks to record highs. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up about 11 points this morning. Dow futures up 76. NASDAQ futures up 38. The DAX in Germany's down 0.2%. 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 1.78%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.55%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.4% or 22 cents at $58.03 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.1%, up $1.10 to $15.55.10 an ounce. The euro 1.1158 against the dollar. British pound 1.3055, and the yen now at 110 even. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, in a dramatic procession across the U.S. Capitol, House Democrats carried the formal articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump to the Senate, setting the stage for only the third trial to remove a president in American history. Trump complained that it was all a hoax yesterday, even as fresh details emerged about his efforts in Ukraine. Lev Parnas, an indicted associate of Rudy Giuliani, accused President Trump of lying for saying that he did not know what Parnas and Giuliani were doing in Ukraine. In the NBA, the Nets, Celtics, and Wizards all lost. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's just before 5:49 on Wall Street. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. Columnist Leonid Bershidsky joins us on a very significant development out of Russia. President Vladimir Putin announced a surprise government shakeup and a constitutional overhaul that could allow him to extend his 20-year rule in Moscow. Leonid, good morning. What is President Putin up to here?
Good morning. He's proposed a massive constitution reform, basically rewriting the Russian constitution, which has not changed significantly since 1993 when it was first adopted. He is sort of changing the entire governance system in Russia in a way that the formal office holders like the president and the prime minister will face more curbs, more checks and balances, and on the surface more parliamentary control. At the same time, he wants to enshrine in the Constitution a body that already exists under his administration as an advisory one called the State Council. It includes the parliamentary leaders and the leaders of the regions, as well as Putin himself. If that becomes sort of a constitutional body, that creates an opportunity for Putin to head it up once he's gone as president in 2024. Or this reform could create other opportunities for him to stay in power while not being president anymore, such as a chance to run the country as leader of the ruling party, which controls the parliament and therefore controls all these other offices subject to the new checks and balances, such as the presidency and the prime ministership. It's a pretty complex reform. We don't have all the details yet, but the details are basically in Putin's head, and they will emerge out of Putin's head in the coming weeks and months.
But it sounds like what you're saying, at least from what we know so far, is that it sounds as though President Putin is contemplating diminishing the powers of the presidency and empowering other segments of the government just in time for him to leave the presidency. What does that say about his potential strategy for holding on to power after his term expires in 2024?
Well, that's exactly the point. The formal offices, as we know them now, the presidency and the prime ministership, will be weaker, and so that will create more of an opportunity for Putin to pull the strings from behind the scenes, the way, say, Yaroslav Kaczynski is doing in Poland now as leader of the ruling party, or the way Nursultan Nazarbayev, the first president of Kazakhstan, who resigned last year as president, is still doing in Kazakhstan as head of the Security Council in that country. Putin is switching to a less formal scheme of running Russia post-24.
As you say, the details of this idea are still fairly scant. What do you expect to come out next in terms of what we could learn about what Putin is proposing here?
Well, we need to look very closely at what powers are proposed for the State Council once the actual constitutional amendments come out. A working group has been formed to actually write them down, and in the coming weeks we'll see what they come up with. We should watch for any party forming activity or any reform of the ruling United Russia Party, which has the majority in parliament now. That could also be in preparation for a new role for Putin. Now we can only see that he's appointed a very technocratic new prime minister, Mikhail Mishustin, who is a supremely talented and skillful bureaucrat, but no politician at all. He has no interest in politics. Very
important development out of Moscow. Thanks for this, Leonid. Much appreciated. That's Bloomberg opinion columnist Leonid Bershidsky joining us this morning. And you can read his column. It's called Putin's New Plan to Hold Power Forever. And more from Bloomberg Opinion at Bloomberg.com/opinion. On the terminal, type OPIN GO. Karen?
All right, Nathan, thank you. 5:53 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Law Report, brought to you by American Arbitration Association. Business disputes are inevitable. Resolve faster with the American Arbitration Association, the global leader in alternative dispute resolution for over 90 years. More at adr.org. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
Chief Justice John Roberts asked whether saying, "Okay, boomer," is enough to show age bias in the workplace. It was a hypothetical question. The Supreme Court is considering 2 discrimination cases. New York State's top financial regulator says a state probe into payroll processing companies could result in new rules for the entire industry. And senators in Washington state passed a bill that would ban retailers from providing customers with single-use plastic bags.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need on one legal research platform. Guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now the big legal story we're watching. The House officially sending articles of impeachment to the Senate yesterday. The resolution endorses House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's choice of 7 House managers to prosecute the case against President Trump. For more on what's next, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks with former federal prosecutor Jessica Roth, who's a professor at Cardozo Law School.
Pelosi said the emphasis in choosing the House managers was on litigators, and it is true that 6 out of 7 are lawyers. But did you also see an emphasis on diversity? 4 men and 3 women, including 2 African Americans and 1 Hispanic, a range of ages, and coming from different geographic areas.
I think we do see an emphasis on diversity along a number of metrics, and I think that it is excellent that she made a choice to put together a diverse team because they will bring their respective strengths to this process. And so she has, for example, Zoe Lofgren, somebody who has experience in Congress in the impeachment proceeding of Bill Clinton, as well as having worked in Congress on the impeachment inquiry for President Nixon. She has Sylvia Garcia of Texas, who has experience as a judge. So, you have people with a range of experiences, and I think that will only be to the better of their ability to work effectively as a team and to communicate this case to the senators and to the American public.
The House Intelligence Committee released new information turned over by Lev Parnas, an indicted former associate of Rudy Giuliani. How important is that evidence?
Some of that evidence looks to be quite important, and I'm thinking in particular of a letter that Rudy Giuliani wrote that was disclosed to President Zelensky of the Ukraine, in which Giuliani requested a meeting and indicated that he was acting as the personal representative of the President of the United States. And that's important because it's the first written corroboration that we have of what we've heard from Rudy Giuliani orally, that he was acting as the personal representative of the President, and also from various other witnesses who appeared before the House who talked about what Rudy Giuliani was doing for the President, essentially as a personal political errand. So I think that letter in particular is quite important. And then there are other documents that include apparently text messages and contemporaneous notes that again corroborate the account that we've heard from various witnesses. So it could potentially be quite significant.
And that's Cardozo Law Professor Jessica Roth speaking with Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview plus analysis of the latest legal news by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcasts. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. Futures this morning on the rise. S&P futures up about 11 points. Dow futures up 79 and NASDAQ futures up 37. The DAX in Germany's down 0.1%. 10-year Treasury down 1/32nd, yield 1.78%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.55%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.3%. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Had the same job for the last 15 years?
working with the same people, in the same office, drinking tea from the same comedy mug, eating the same crayfish and rocket sandwich every lunchtime, using the same business jargon, and climbing the same greasy pole. What does that even mean? Then maybe it's time to switch it up, starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa, with its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
You don't just live in one room, so why should you Wi-Fi? With Sky Broadband's Wi-Fi guarantee, you'll get Wi-Fi in every room or money back. Perfect for food shopping in the bedroom, gaming in your PJs in the lounge, or streaming sci-fi movies in the kitchen. Get Sky's super-fast broadband and Wi-Fi guarantee. £32 a month for 18 months with $19.95 setup. Click on the banner now.
Sky Fibre errors, Sky Kit required. Refund on boost component of subscription paid during current minimum term up to date of claim. Minimum 3 megabits per second or money back. Prices may change during minimum term. See sky.com/guarantee.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, January 16th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Praise and criticism roll in on the freshly signed trade deal.
Today we take a momentous step.
It falls way below the expectations.
That is a big boon for Iowa farmers.
Details, analysis, winners and losers, and the Phase 1 agreement coming up.
The articles of impeachment are now in the hands of the Senate, plus an indicted associate of Rudy Giuliani accuses President Trump of lying about Ukraine. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Nets lost in Philadelphia. Seton Hall upset fifth-ranked Butler. St. John's lost at Providence.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. futures are gaining after another record close for stocks. We're coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 11 points this morning. Dow futures up 83. NASDAQ futures up 39. The DAX in Germany's down 0.1%. CAC in Paris, little changed. FTSE 100 down 0.4%. Nikkei 225 in Japan gained less than 0.1%. And the Hang Seng in Hong Kong was up 0.4%. 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 1.78%. Yield on the 2-year 1.55%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.25% or 14 cents to $57.95 a barrel. COMEX gold little changed, up 60 cents to $15.54.60 an ounce. The euro 1.1158 against the dollar, and the yen is at 109.99. Nathan.
Well, Karen, the Phase 1 trade deal is in the books.
Today we take a momentous step, one that has never been taken before with China.
The much-anticipated signing did little to boost stocks, though the Dow and the S&P 500 nudged higher to close at records. For one veteran trade negotiator, details of the agreement fall short. Wendy Cutler is managing director of the Asia Society and former deputy U.S. trade representative.
It falls way below the expectations they set out at the beginning of this negotiation when they were going to address all the issues that were keeping U.S. companies out of the Chinese market and do it within 90 days. This negotiation proved a lot tougher than they thought.
For now, analysts appear hesitant to declare a winner in the deal, saying the toughest negotiations are yet to come.
Still, for now, American farmers and finance firms can declare a win. We spoke with Republican Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa.
This Phase 1 China deal focuses heavily on the purchase of agricultural goods by China. So number one, that is a big boon for Iowa farmers. But then you talk about enforcement mechanisms and you get into intellectual property theft, things of that nature. We will continue to build on that as we move into Phase 2.
Commodities markets, though, might have expected more. Prices fell for most raw materials that are part of the agreement, including soybeans, cotton, and corn.
The deal will also help investment banks and credit card companies grab a bigger slice of China's finance industry. Here with details on that is Bloomberg's Lucille Liu in Beijing.
There is a bring forward of the timeline for opening, and there have been some enforceable deadlines set. So, for example, we've seen for securities firms, they brought forward the timeline for full foreign ownership from December 1st 1st to April 1st. And they've also said that they would review applications from electronic payment services providers in less than 90 days.
Credit card stocks were some of the biggest gainers on the deal. MasterCard rose 1.1%, while Visa finished the day up 1.9%.
Business leaders in Europe, however, are not thrilled with the agreement. We spoke with Jörg Wotka, president of the EU Chamber of Commerce in China.
It means that for the next 2 years, $200 billion will be basically traded between two nations without this kind of competition. And this is what we actually don't like about this.
The EU Chamber of Commerce president says the deal rewrites globalization, and he questions whether it conforms to World Trade Organization rules.
And what's notably absent from the Phase 1 agreement is any relief for Huawei Technologies. The Chinese company has been the subject of U.S. sanctions, and it faces the prospect of even more restrictions. Still, Huawei's Director of Congressional Affairs, Donald Morrissey, tells us he's optimistic for relief in future agreements.
The trade deals between the two countries, Huawei has no input there. However, like any global company, we look for trade stability as well as open markets. And we've always preached that, and we hope that's the result down the road as we get to Phase 2 or Phase 3.
Reports suggest the Trump administration is considering plans to further limit the ability of U.S. companies to supply Huawei, even as Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says he doesn't view Huawei as a chess piece in negotiations with China.
Market reaction to the trade deal was fairly muted in Asia overnight, and Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us now from Singapore with the details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Karen. Stocks in China were among the weakest in the region. The CSI 300 down 0.4% on the close, while both the on and offshore yuan moved back towards 6-month highs against the dollar following the signing of the deal. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 closed slightly higher at 23,933 points in Tokyo. Healthcare stocks among the best performers as Japan's first confirmed case of the new coronavirus lifted mask makers, along with companies which make antibacterial equipment. And in Taipei, the TAIEX closed down by 0.2%. TSMC shares falling on reports the US is pressing the chip maker to produce on American soil, and despite beating expectations with its fourth quarter numbers. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sally, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thank you, Juliet. Back here in the U.S., we have more bank earnings on the docket. Morgan Stanley publishes results this morning after mixed reports from Bank of America and Goldman Sachs. Here with a preview is Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky.
Analysts are forecasting a 40% year-over-year increase in earnings per share, even as revenue is seen falling by 14%. Trading may jump from a tough 2018 fourth quarter, according to Bloomberg Intelligence, while advisory could temper fee gains given the strong year-over-year comparison. The bank may provide detail concerning staff reductions, reported by Bloomberg News at about 1,500, with a potential related charge of up to $200 million. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Larry, thank you. S&P futures higher up 10 points this morning. Dow futures up 78 and NASDAQ futures up 36. The DAX in Germany is down about 0.2%. 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 1.78%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.55%. The euro is at 1.1159 against the dollar. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
Thank you, Karen. 6:07 on Wall Street. And Michael Barr is here with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Now that the Senate has received the articles of impeachment against President Trump, plans have been put in motion leading to opening arguments next Tuesday. Bloomberg's Bob Moon reports.
It will be a day of high drama, the agenda laid out by Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
We've officially invited the House managers to come to the Senate at noon to exhibit their articles of impeachment.
One of those House members, Adam Schiff, says he feels the weight of history.
We feel that we are carrying out the will of the framers of our Constitution, and that's a pretty serious load to carry.
Chief Justice John Roberts will make his way across the street from the Supreme Court and be sworn in by Senator Chuck Grassley.
Then the Chief Justice will swear in all of us senators.
And for the first time, the President will become part of the process, receiving a formal summons to send his defense counsel. Bob Moon, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Lev Parnas, an indicted associate of Rudy Giuliani, accused President Trump of lying for saying that he did not know what Parnas and Giuliani were doing in Ukraine. In an interview with MSNBC, Parnas said, "I would not do anything without the consent of Rudy Giuliani or the president." New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy says the state's economy under the last administration did not grow and was not fair. Murphy talked about New Jersey's business environment with Bloomberg's Carol Masser.
We've got a minimum wage that's finally getting toward $15, equal work for equal pay for equal work, earned sick leave, funding women's health and Planned Parenthood, criminal justice reform, lots of things there.
Murphy also signed legislation expanding the definition of terrorism under state law in response to last month's fatal attack on a kosher market in Jersey City. Virginia's governor says state law enforcement agencies have discovered credible and serious threats of violence planned for a pro-gun rally at the Capitol in Richmond this Monday. Governor Ralph Northam issued a state of emergency to go into effect Friday night until Tuesday morning, banning all weapons, including firearms, from Capitol grounds.
This intelligence comes from mainstream channels, both offline and online, such as alternative dark web channels used by violent groups and white nationalists from outside Virginia.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Thank you, Michael. 6:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Nathan, for the first time this week, a World Series winning manager was not fired. With A.J. Hinch out in Houston, Alex Cora in Boston, the focus has now turned to new Mets manager Carlos Beltran. He not only played for the Astros in 2017 when they were stealing signs illegally, the MLB report says Beltran was involved in hatching the scheme, though baseball decided not to discipline him. If he does keep the Mets job, Beltran's certain to be asked about all this when spring training begins next month. Meanwhile, here's Red Sox owner John Henry on the departure of Cora.
Since joining the Red Sox, Alex Cora has been one of the many people who we work with that has consistently put the organization ahead of their own interests. He did that yesterday as we discussed how to move forward.
Red Sox now searching for a new manager. Nets lost in Philadelphia 117-106. Sixers finished the game on a 13-2 run. Got 34 points from Tobias Harris. Nets have now lost 9 of 11. St. John's fell to 1-4 in the Big East. 63-58 loss at Providence. Seton Hall 5-0 atop the Big East. Quite a win for the Pirates. They were down 10 at the half. Outscored Butler 48-30 from there. Beat the team ranked 5th in the country 78-70. Miles Powell 29 points. Rutgers still unbeaten at home. 59-50 over Indiana. Fordham lost by 2 in overtime at Duquesne. Northeast Conference Battle of Brooklyn. LIU topped St. Francis. The Giants will interview Jason Garrett for their offensive coordinator job. He was just, of course, fired as the longtime head coach of the Cowboys. Former Giant general manager, the late George Young, named for induction to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, along with former Jets tackle Winston Hill. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
John, looks like there's one thing LSU quarterback Joe Burrow won't be able to keep. The national champion Heisman Trophy winner and likely number 1 pick in the NFL draft won't be able to keep the football used in the final play of the championship game. One memorabilia expert says the ball could command at least $100,000 at auction, but an LSU spokesman says that ball is theirs, and it's probably going to stay in the trophy case at LSU's football operations facility. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at bevel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Dad, I'm doing the mashed potatoes too.
Do the Albert Bartlett potato mash.
Do the twist.
Do the patatas bravas with a British twist.
Yeah. Do the brown sauce, balsamic and chutney.
Oh, do the melting potato slices.
Do the dishes.
Grab a brand new recyclable bag today and do the Albert Bartlett.
He's got a brand new bag.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one